Welcome to Bigfoot
and the Bunny.
This is a couple's journey into the mysterious,
the unknown, and the paranormal.
I'm your host, Chris Carr.
And I'm your host, Kristen Johnson.
Together we are Bigfoot and the Bunny.
And we are live. Welcome to Bigfoot and the Bunny. Happy Saturday, folks.
Happy Saturday.
I'm Chris Carr.
And I'm Kristen Johnson.
And we're back in our somewhat haunted studio.
Yeah.
Seemingly. We're just going to tell you guys real quick. If you've been following the show and you're following our Thursday show, Dark Horse Paranormal Podcast, you know that we've had some activity in the back shelf there that may or may not be surrounded about that doll that's over my shoulder. However, we've moved some of our devices up to the shelf above the doll because we noticed on our Thursday show, we had a little cat ball up there. And that cat ball for the previous 3 shows before that was sitting on the doll's lap, and it never went off during any of the shows. What we did experience was our camera kind of panning to the left and the right sporadically, which we could not debunk. The camera sits on a tripod outside of our work area. See, I can't shake it. There's nothing I can do here to make that camera move at all.
Right.
And that, of course, is the intent of being on the tripod. And it was moving. So it made a little video about that.
Yeah, it did.
It continued to, but on Thursday, the cat ball went crazy, like through the whole show. And we're trying to have like this serious conversation with our guest, great guy, a psychic, Robert Lindsay Milne. And, there's this twinkling above our heads going on like through the whole show. And people are like, oh, that cat ball's going crazy. So
yeah, we know.
we kind of set that up with a K2 meter.
So I put the K2 meter up next to it.
What's going to happen. I mean, rest assured, there's like nothing we can do to like set those things off. If they happen, it may be a phenomena. I mean, it's data, we'll leave it at that. But there's a story. We got a video out there about why we think the doll is haunted and that kind of stuff you guys can check out on most likely whatever page you're watching this on. We want to give a big shout out to a cause that the Paralanx Network, which is just wonderful. We love you guys.
Yes, we do.
Is supporting, and this is for Waverly Hills. Apparently George, who's on the board, is being kicked off of the board that he created, and he's really the guy that made Waverly Hills, put it on the map, and makes it the paranormal Mecca. I know it's on our bucket list.
Absolutely.
To visit, so that it can keep running and continue its thing. So we're trying to raise some money for them, their cause. You can reach out to them at www.savewaverlyhills.com. And please do check it out. There's t-shirts, there's ways to donate, and a little explanation of what's going on with that. I've put that in the ticker, as long as a link to our awesome guest that we have today.
We love her.
We do. We certainly do. And she's come back. We had her on in October, I believe it was, and we were talking about Omnipresent, which is a scary as fuck book. And I'm just going to leave it as that. We read that. Kristen, you read that whole thing. Yes. You sent it to your mom.
I sent it to my mom.
She got so scared. I think she stopped reading it at some point because she was frightened.
But she went back.
But she went back.
It. Yeah.
And I mean, it's a really good and true ghost story. And it's a theme you've heard before. I mean, it's that thing of like, you're struggling and, single mom, and she gets a house. It just seems like the seemingly perfect house. That is our background today, is a picture of that house. And things go awry, and that it's a great story. She wrote a follow-up to that we just started to get into in October, called Omnipresent: What Happened Next. And she has a new book coming out that she's going to tell us all about. So let's bring her on without further ado. Her name is Lynn Monet. Hey, Lynn.
Hi. Thank you so much
doing?
for having me. I just love
Welcome
being here with you
back.
guys.
We are psyched to have you back. And we want to get into this. I know like not everybody saw the original show, and maybe we could cover a little bit about that house briefly. And in fact, just if you can just pause one moment, I'm going to take us out of frame just so people can see the background and they can see a picture of this. There you go. So there's that house. And I know if you look real close, there's something in one of those windows.
Yes.
Yes.
The upper kitchen window is the face of one of the demons looking out the window.
Yes.
It's
One of the
very
demons.
crazy.
A fun thing to have to say. And see some people saying hello out there. Hello, Elaine.
Hello, Elaine Carr. We
I
love
hope you are enjoying your week. You're having a good week. Elaine just retired, and that is awesome. Emery Young, hello, everyone. Ken
Ann.
Allen. Hey, Kristen. I need to go to Waverly also. Yes, we do. We should all go together. All right. Sorry.
Already with Jack. So we
Some
have to,
shout outs to
Yeah.
our friends. But yes, the demon in the window and one hell of a haunting.
Yeah.
And you wanted to tell us quickly just about
the
recap the original haunting, and we'll get into what happened next, which we started, and we'll talk about the new book.
Okay. I purchased the house back in 1976. I owned it for 8 months. Out of that 8 months, I slept in it twice, and it was haunted so badly that I was never, ever actually able to move into it and live in it. Being a single mother, I was recovering financially from a devastating divorce, and I was living in a single wide trailer in a mobile home park in an older mobile home, rebuilding my credit. And I had been looking for a home with my realtor for over a year. And of course, on my single mother income, there was always an issue with the house. Either it was near a stinky paper mill, or it needed lots of updates, or not in a great area. And this house, a colleague of hers had come back from taking pictures of it, and it wasn't even on the MLS yet. And she told her, she said, she called me and told me, my partner just, came back. She's taken pictures of this house. This house is in your price range, and it is too good to be true. And of course that should have resonated with me, but I was excited to see what it was. So I met her. We did go to the house. As we went up the walkway to the beautiful double entry doors of this mostly brick exterior house, she immediately started having trouble with the key. And of course, the key and the locks on that front door is a key piece throughout the story, where one of the demons manipulated the locks and controlled that stairwell that it would run through frequently. So when we finally did end up getting into the house, I was walking up the stairs to it was a let me just back up. It was a split level house. So you would enter in on a foyer, and you had descending stairs and ascending stairs going up. And I went ahead to go up to the upper level. And as I'm walking up there, I get my first glimpse of something. And it was a young man hanging in the stairwell over the descending stairs. There was a wrought iron railing on that upper level to prevent you from falling onto the descending stairs, and he was hanging from that. And this event was later confirmed by the next door neighbor, who had lived on the street for many, many years, even before the road was paved. He was the first house. So he remembers the family that built the house in 1976, and he remembers the young man. The parents were going through a divorce, the young man hanging himself, and the day that the mother came home and found him in there. So, but of course, I looked directly at it, and then there doesn't seem to be anything there. And I'm wondering why I'm thinking about something so horrible. This house is just unbelievable. I mean, I was thinking how proud I would be as a single mother, being able to provide such a grand home for my children. It was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2,400 square foot house. It had a breakfast nook, formal dining area, formal living room, family room. It was a nice house, fireplace, full stone wall with a fireplace. And so gorgeous. I asked if we could come back, and some things did happen while we were walking through the house, but I asked if we could come back with my kids that afternoon, and she agreed. So we met there, and of course my children were thrilled with the house, and they were running through the hallway picking their bedrooms, and then they asked to go downstairs. And when they go downstairs, my daughter's 13 at the time, my son is 7, and she comes back up and she said to me, "Mommy, I do not like this house." And of course, I'm standing there with the realtor who's been dragging me around for a year trying to find a home. And I'm embarrassed at my daughter's comment. I'm thinking that here she is, a teenager. She's probably realizing that we're moving away from her friends and she might have to go to a new school. And so I asked her again, I said, what did you say? Here we're living in a single wide mobile home that would fit 4 times inside of this house if you stacked it on top of each other and side by side. And I'm like, how could you not like this house?
Exactly. She should be delighted.
Yeah. And I mean, it was on a floor to flat lot.
It's a beautiful house.
Yeah, it was nice. It was a large yard. And so she said no. She said there's something weird about this house, and I really don't like it. Well, I should have listened. I didn't. And I went ahead and I made an offer on the house. There had also been another offer made that day, so that put the pressure on to make a good offer, and obviously I won. So I ended up the day of the closing. I had been told prior when we were driving to the house to see it the first time that the people had the house move-in ready because they had to leave out of state for work purposes, and that they were paying 2 mortgages and they were wanting to sell that house so that they could get out from underneath the expense of having the expense of multiple places to live. So when the closing came, they were about 2 to 2.5 hours late getting there. And when we were going through the closing, I found out that they had not moved away to another state, that they were living in the home with their in-laws or somebody's parents, and that they were still working at the same place, and they were only 20 minutes from the house. So I just assumed that there was some kind of maybe financial problems that they were having. But the main thing is that the mother, the young woman, the wife, would not look me in the face. She stared at her feet the whole time. And I would try to talk to her. I tried to lean over to get into her view. I was talking about putting in wooden flooring into the house, and she said, oh, well, that's what we wanted to do. So anyway, I was grateful to get the keys. We go the first night. I bring dinner along. We're going to have a floor picnic with the kids. And I'm cooking I'm browning up hamburger for tacos in the kitchen, and my daughter comes in to the doorway of the kitchen and she says, what did you want? And I said, I didn't call you. And she said, yes, you did. She said, you called me. I said I would be there, and you called me a second time. So what did you want? And I said, no, I swear I didn't call you. And she said, yes, you did. And then my son comes in, and he, of course, is peering in underneath her arm. And he said, Mommy, I heard you too. So I rationalized it. Brittany's a popular name. You know, maybe there's some other mother out in the yard calling for her kid to come home. It's dinner time, and we'll figure out who that is. So in that very first day, the entities, there were two demons and the young man that had hung himself, his spirit was still in the house, had learned how to mimic my voice and who was who, that I was Mommy, that Brittany was Brittany, my son's name was Austin. So they learned quickly. So they have an intelligence. They learned quickly the names, and that, you know, that I was the mommy person. So we ended up leaving that night. The kids had school the next day, so I dropped them off, went back to the house. The lights were all on in the house, and I'm kind of speeding up a little bit because we have a couple of books to talk about. And so the lights were all on in the house, and I thought maybe that somebody had been entrusted with a key. I mean, even the light was on inside of the oven. So I went across the street, introduced myself, found out that nobody had been entrusted with a key. I mean, this house looks like a normal house in the suburbs. It's a beautiful home.
It is.
Yeah, isn't it?
It sure does.
So,
it's gorgeous.
it is
I
gorgeous.
want to give a quick shout out to Joshua Dixon for sending some stars. Really
Yes.
appreciate that, Joshua.
Yes, stars.
Thank you.
Thank you
Very
so
much. Thank you. And there's a little close up of the window of the house, and I don't know if I can make it bigger, but there is something spooky going on.
Yeah,
there.
there's a face, and a lot of people think that it might be the reflection
It's
of the tree,
tree.
but it's not. And I'll tell you why. That tree was a one of those miniature trees, and the windows on the second floor. So the tree was actually shorter than the second floor window. So it wouldn't.
Yeah, it's the angle, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
so it would not have been able to have
Closer to the
reflected
camera.
on there that way. And of course, I'm standing out at the road and the tree's closer to me. So yeah, and also that face kind of has it's not a green like the tree. It's more of a bluish, greenish color if you look at it. But yeah, there he is. But anyway, so so the lights are all on in the house. I find out that that nobody has a key. I close up the house the next day. I have trouble with the lock in the front door, getting it to close, and I leave. I come back the next morning after dropping my kids off at school. I had wanted to put a fight.
Oh,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No,
I
it's
apologize.
okay.
Sorry. Yeah, that's going to happen, I think.
Yeah,
You're talking to you.
No, that's fine because I've already seen it walk through. But anyway, it's already in the room. Your little friend, by the way.
Yes, there's 3 actually.
Yeah, well, I've seen one when you were talking about it earlier.
Yeah.
It came in and walked right behind you and right behind Kristen, and then walked over towards Chris. So that's where that one ended up. So anyway, and it looked male, by the way, that one did.
Thank you.
Yes, it's a dude, and he's like about, I would say, like between 30 and maybe 40 years old. He's in that 30-ish range, and he's got brown hair. So anyway, with that being said,
I keep telling him that's what I feel.
I know, but there's also a little girl, but it's okay.
Well, no, that's the one that I saw. That's the one that I saw because you were talking about them, and they come. They like the attention. But I wouldn't be surprised.
I think he's the one who was moving the camera. To be honest with you,
I would not be surprised.
Yeah,
I would not be surprised. But I saw it walk in the room when you were talking about him. So
thank you for the confirmation.
Thank you.
Yeah. So anyway, I just and are you sensing too that you have a male in there, by the way?
Yeah. Yes, I do.
Yes, it is. Okay.
And I you described it exactly like I saw it as well.
Good.
Oh,
Okay. All righty. So the next day I go back and I go to put my key in that lock, that crazy lock, and the door just opens. And I didn't even turn the lock of the key. And of course, then I go back across the street and I find that all of the interior doors that lead to the exterior are open, are unlocked, including the sliding glass doors and the garage doors. So there was one door in particular that caught my eye, which was the one that was downstairs in the garage near the workshop. And I knew that someone would have had to have been inside of the house in order to be able to open that one. They would have had to have moved all the boxes that I had stacked up in front of there and then put them back exactly as they were. So I again went across the street, told the people, here's my phone number. If you see kids playing in the yard, if you see anybody coming here when I'm not here, please call the police and then call me. I'll be here in 20-25 minutes. So they agreed to do that. Things continued to happen. Things really, really started to amp up. There's a lot that happened in that house. Of course, I was in denial. I grew up in a haunted house, and I was taught to deny my abilities simply because of the time frame that I was raised in, and also traditional religion scared the bejesus out of me. And so I got used to rationalizing and denying what I was seeing. So, but in this house, it just, now as an adult, I was wide open. My kids were seeing them. Their friends were seeing them. My friends were seeing them. People were seeing them with me in the room at the same time. So it wasn't just me seeing them at different times. There were other people in the room with me that saw the exact same thing at the exact same time. So anyway, the first 2 nights we had a sleepover. My daughter invited a friend who also had the same name, and they came over to spend the night. And about 2-3 o'clock in the morning, the girl wanted to go home. Well, what 13-year-old during a sleepover is ever going to want to get up and go home? They're usually up all night giggling. And even though it was a school night, she was adamant about leaving. And I finally had to have her call her parents, hoping to comfort her, because I didn't want to drive 25 minutes in my pajamas, and they didn't either, to take her back to where she needed to be. So she ended up staying, and she ended up staying awake the rest of the night. Whatever it was that bothered her, she saw when she went into the kitchen to get Oreos. It spooked her. And then the second time that we came back, we brought our dog. We had a little schnauzer named Sally. Yeah, and she did not want to go in that house. She
Don't
did
blame
not.
her.
Yeah, she balked so hard at that front door that her collar came over her head. And I had to catch her, and I thought, well, maybe she'll be okay out in the front yard. Maybe she has to go to the bathroom. So I tethered her up. I had a long lead, and I put her, there was a tree or a pole or something that I had put her there to let her run around in the grass for a little bit. But when it came time to bring her into the house, I actually had to carry her into the house. And a little while later, I'm sorry, did you want to say something?
Oh, no, not at all. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I'm my throat.
That's okay. So when after that happened, I was in the kitchen again, and the dog came up into the doorway, and she was just trembling, and I thought that she was cold. So I wrapped her up in towels, and she wouldn't take her eyes off me. But it turns out that an event occurred downstairs in that family room with my children and the dog in there when a demon presented, and the door was closed, and my dog almost dug a hole in the drywall around the door trying to get out.
Wow.
Room. It was, yeah. And that's why she was trembling when she came up. But of course, I didn't know that at the time. And so this particular night, day that we stayed, there was night I had queen size blow up mattresses, and my kids had drug them into the master bedroom. They were watching a movie together with VHS. So you know how long ago that was. And, yeah, VHS.
Oh, we do recall.
Hidalgo. And
I love that movie.
yeah. So I decided, I had pulled up the carpeting. I had so many rooms that were waiting to be finished that I wanted to be able to walk into one room and say, I'm done. It looks great. So I decided to take on the master bathroom, which was small, and I could paint the ceiling and the walls all in one setting. So it took me just a couple of hours, and I was finished, and my kids had fallen asleep. It was about 11:30, and I left the bathroom to go into the kitchen to clean up my paintbrushes, my mess. And so after I did that, I left the kitchen. As I'm leaving the kitchen, there's that wrought iron railing again so that you don't fall over the descending stairs as soon as you leave out of the kitchen. And which was also where the young man was hanging from. And I see this swiftly moving thing shooting up the stairs, across the double entry doors, and up the ascending stairs in front of me and down the hallway. And I was frozen. I was beyond peeing my pants. And I'm standing there, and I'm like, what on earth is that? And it's the first time that I saw the demon in the house, which is the one that's peering out the window, looks just like him. He was on his haunches, looked wolf-like. He had a narrowing to his face with large nasal holes like a horse that almost took up the whole end of his face. He stood about 5 foot. I'm 5'9", and when he came up, he was just a little bit shorter than me. He was a brownish, dull brown color, and the skin looked like it was just kind of like laying over bone. There were some little nubby things on the top of his head, and he was kind of hunched with long fingernails. The thing about him too is he had ears like a rabbit, but they were on each side of his head instead of on top.
Right.
And they were backwards. They were glazing down, like turned backwards on his head, grazing over his shoulders. And I'm saying him, it felt like in male energy. And I'm trying to rationalize. I've been tainting with fumes. It's been a while since I've eaten anything. My blood sugar might be low. We didn't have window dressings.
And it's interesting with the rabbit ears too. When you think about it, rabbits being a symbol of spring, Ostara,
Esther.
new life,
Yeah.
right? And then you've got them kind of in the inverse, and
right.
it's a creepy image.
Right. And on each side, like the FTD man. So yeah, it was a very creepy image. And of course, I didn't have window dressings on all of the windows. So I'm thinking, maybe somebody went under a streetlight with a motorcycle or bicycle, because it definitely wasn't a car. But then it didn't make sense with the way that it could come up from the ground floor and go across the double entry doors. And so I'm just frozen. Then I hear my dog Sally, she's just ferociously growling at something. And I thought, oh my God, so I got out of my funk and I went down the hallway to the master bedroom, and my dog is fixated on that master bedroom door. And I come in and she's still growling. Her hair is up on her back. She won't take her eyes off of the door. I pet her. She puts her ears back briefly and she still is not calming down. So finally I picked her up, and she was still like stiff in her body. And I took her outside thinking maybe that she needed to go to the bathroom, ended up having to carry her back into the house again. And then she ran in and nestled in between my two kids. And I, of course, then laid down and went to sleep too. Now, I'd like to say, just to back up a little bit, the night before my son took a bath, he put on his pajamas, his little shorts, his Blues Clues or Bob the Builder, whoever it was. And so I had full view of his body and his skin and his legs and everything. And the next morning when we woke up in that house, I asked my daughter, I said, how did you sleep last night? And she said, I didn't. She said, I felt like something, creepy was staring at us from the doorway all night long. And then when my son got up, he had bite marks on his legs.
Right.
I kid you not. I would fight God for my children. And what I'm telling you, you can believe it or not, it is the truth. He had 3 sets of bite marks on his legs, 2 on one leg, 1 on the other. They were purple. You could count the teeth. It looked like dog bite marks with the way that the teeth were. It wasn't a human bite mark, but the bite marks were smaller than, say, like my dog would have made. But they were a lot bigger than like a rat or something would make. And they were fresh. And I asked my son, I mean, to get them that purple, you would feel something biting you that would hurt like that.
Exactly.
And it happened while he was sleeping, and he woke up, and he's looking at them and he's touching them. And, I asked him, I see he had this little dinosaur, the Toy Story dinosaur. And I thought, well, maybe he was pressing that on his leg, but it wasn't. Yeah, but it wasn't even with us. We didn't even have that toy along. So, I was like, maybe we need an exterminator. But anyway, we ended up leaving, and I was creeped out. I felt unnerved with that, with the marks that were left on my son. And so I stayed away for a little while. I went to work. I was working a Baylor shift as a nurse. And I just like to say to everybody too, that most of them, they're saying if they saw the guy hanging in the stairwell, they would have been out of there. But we didn't. When I bought the house, it was in March, and we weren't going to move in until the summer months because there was only 8 weeks of school left. So I decided to have the renovations done and then move in at the summer and have my kids meet kids in the neighborhood and start fresh in their new school at the beginning of the school year. So we were still staying at the other place, going back and forth at this point. And thank God we had somewhere else to sleep because, man,
Yes.
2 nights was enough. So we left. That was the second night. I was having problem with workers coming and going in there. I had 4 workers. The first 3 left and never came back. The third one was a friend of mine's cousin, so I actually got to find out about what happened. And the 4th one was stoned all the time. So he,
I remember that.
so, he carried his own fan club. He had an argon on his back, for that matter, and he, they liked him. He was part of the crowd. So they didn't bother him. He had his own, like I said, his own minions with him, and he did good work. And as long as he didn't do it around my children, I was okay with that. And so when the first worker and the second worker had, excuses that sounded reasonable for not coming back. One of them left his DeWalt tools and never came back for them and never came back to be paid. The third one was my friend's cousin. And we were in the house together that day working. He was putting the wooden flooring down in my son's bedroom, and I was in the hallway just outside of the bedroom door painting the walls. And I turn, and out of my peripheral vision, I see as clear as I'm looking at you two, this young man walking up the stairs to the main level. He had on blue jeans. He had on a white Oxford shirt. He had on like loafer shoes, hair parted down the middle, brownish colored hair. kind of a ruddy complexion or type thing. And he was kind of somber. And I turned to him and I said, "Did you knock?" I mean, I thought that it was some person, disoriented person that had walked in the house, or maybe he knocked and I didn't hear him knock, So I'm like, "Did you knock?" And of course, Bobby, who's putting the stuff, the flooring into my son's room, says, no, I might have bumped something or dropped something. He thought I was talking to him. So when I look directly at the stairs, of course, I see things better out of my peripheral vision and at a distance. There goes your friend again, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah. So anyway, I realized at that time when I looked at the stairs, I could see, which I know you guys, I know you see this too. It's like a waffling to the air, almost like gas fumes or fumes off of a hot road, that wavering to the air sometimes when you see spirits
sure.
up close. So I could see that. So I knew at that point in time, like, oh, okay, the house is haunted. This guy is in here. I need to maybe, have a blessing done on the house. So I left and I get a call. I'm in the car line picking up my kids. I get a call from Bobby and he says, "I have to leave. I have to leave right now. There's something weird about this house that I've never experienced in my life." And the line dropped. And so it took me about an hour or so to get back a hold of him. And I guess he had time to get away from the house. And I said to him, I said, "Are you, is everything okay? What happened? I really need you to be there to finish getting that flooring in, because I had plans to have furniture being brought in, some new bedroom furniture and things that I had purchased for my kids' rooms." And he said, "Well, I just would rather be there when you're going to be there." And I said, "Well, I'm not coming back until Monday." I mean, it was a Friday. We were butt up against the weekend. I worked a Baylor shift as a nurse all weekend. And I wasn't coming back till actually Tuesday of that week. And so anyway, he ended up not coming back to finish the work either. And so after he called me, I said to him, did you secure the house?" And he said no. And there were some windows that were the kind that would crank open, and they would open like this, not the up and down thing. So there were areas that were opened with no screens that he had opened to let the air in. And there was an air conditioner in there too, to kind of dry out something. So I needed to go back to the house and remove the air conditioner and close the windows and lock up the house. And I didn't feel comfortable after seeing that young man coming up the stairs going by myself. So I asked my next door neighbor, Ellen, to go with me. And she agreed to go. And as we're driving down the road, I'm telling her, what I'd seen earlier that day. I said, "Do you believe in ghosts?" And she says, "Oh, yeah, I believe in ghosts." And I said, "Well, I think there's one in this house." I said, "So I appreciate you going with me. If you don't want to go in the house, I understand. I'll get the neighbor's husband across the street to come in with me and pull in the air conditioner. But I really appreciate you going with me. I didn't really want to go by myself in the dark." So we get to the house and she said, "Oh no, I don't have a problem going in with you." We get to the house and I have problems now with the lock where I can't get my key out. I almost broke the key in the lock. And Ellen is standing now in the foyer on the landing, and she says to me, she says, "Oh, you're not going to leave me here and let the boogeyman get me, are you?" Well, they targeted her. She mocked them. They targeted her, So we went in, we went inside and pulled the air conditioner in. I kind of wanted to show her around a little bit too. My daughter wanted a wild horse theme in her room, and I had gotten these beautiful Morgan head horses, hand-carved horses to put a balance over her window. And so I took Ellen in the kitchen to show her those because they were on the counter, and we're standing in the kitchen together, and I can hear this sound of this. It sounds like kind of like a didgeridoo, but it has a static sound to it. So like a wah-wah kind of electrical sounding sound. And I could hear this. And there was this gray fog wall that was accumulating behind us that was moving. It was from ceiling to floor, and it was coming in closer. And I didn't say anything about the sound. And Ellen's holding one of those horse heads in each hand. So her hands are tied up with something. And she said to me, "What's that sound?" And I said, "Can you hear that?" And she's like, "Yeah." I said, "Well, remember I told you about the house being, being haunted, and I just want to show you these, and we're going to leave real quick." And she started screaming. She said, "What is it? What is it? A spider bite?" She said she dropped the horses' heads down. She said that there was something burning badly on her back. She thought she'd been bitten by something. And I lifted up her back and lifted up her shirt, and on her back, right between her shoulder blades and underneath her bra strap, there was a 4-inch claw mark. And it was a single claw mark that looked like a cat scratch, and it was fresh. Being a nurse, you know that a wound, when it starts to welt and bead blood like that it's a fresh response, because even if you pick a scab off, it doesn't get welting thing again.
And just to pause on that, just real quick. So she has a bra strap across it. So here's this fresh scratch,
Right?
but the bra strap is completely intact, and
Yes.
4 inches, it's going to be wider than a bra strap. So
Yes.
the bra strap has no issues, but there it is, this fresh scratch.
That's right.
You can
Yes.
recognize this is fresh. Yes,
Mhm.
just want to clarify that.
Yep, absolutely. And it was actually the way that the bra strap was situated, the claw mark was about maybe 2.5 to 3 inches above it, and then kind of got lost behind it a little bit, if that makes sense. So so I'm like, "Ellen," I'm like, you got a scratch mark on your back. Did you bump into something?" I mean, there was still no furniture in the house. There was nothing to get hurt on. I thought maybe she scratched herself on the corner of the car door getting out, or something, but it was a fresh wound. And she said no, and she started screaming again. And she said to me, "It got me again. It got me again." And this time now she had a claw mark on her belly, below her belly button off to the side. This one was about a 2.5-inch claw mark. And the thing is while we were standing in the kitchen, and right before this happened, I could feel this bristly animal weasel-like thing running in and out of my legs, like in an 8, like making an 8 back, in between the legs and going inward before she had gotten clawed. And but I was, more focused on her screaming. So I started to call out for every name that you can call God. Jesus, Jehovah. I called on Mother Mary. I called on Archangel Michael. I called on everybody, and to protect us in that moment. And the wall, the basement smelling smoggy wall started to move out of the room, but yet it hovered in the doorways. It didn't completely leave. So I told Ellen to go to the car, and she did. And I would lock up and come out, behind her. But of course, I didn't spend much time doing anything but locking the knob lock, because I figured at this point, if anybody wanted to break in, that house could take care of themselves. They can have at it, so they're going to get more than they bargained for.
Right.
So again, in that moment, I realized what a serious problem that I had, and I no longer took my children back there. I started, when I got home, I was on my computer, and I was calling my sister, telling her about what happened. And I didn't realize that my daughter Brittany overheard me on the phone. And when I got off of the phone, she came up out of her bedroom, and she said that she then also knew about the things in the house. And we actually sat down, each of us with a piece of paper, and I had her draw what she saw, and I drew what I saw, and they were almost identical to detail of
All
what
right,
was seen
let
in
me
the house.
stop you there, because this demon, let's call it what it is, right? And that's
Yeah.
not a term we use lightly. We don't even like the
It's
D word,
not
because
the only
it's so
one.
overused, right, in the
Yeah.
paranormal. But there are entities out there that historically, not just in modern TV show times, have been described. Yours has body parts of an animal, and I just want to bring up. I'll bring up one of the Goetic demons here, if you don't mind. Demons of the Goetia, and we're going back, in time here. And you see Baal there, right? And he's got the head of a frog. He's got legs like a spider. He's got a cat's head. And, this is not unusual to have this blending of body parts
Mhm.
in the descriptions of when people actually see demons. So,
Mhm.
and what did everybody draw?
Well, we drew of the wolf one, but the second demon appearance actually, I had an incident in the house with the second demon when I was there alone, and this demon, that same fog wall started to come in on me in the kitchen, and that same didgeridoo sound, and that was the first time, that I had actually. Well, no, actually, that was the second time because I had heard it once before, and then with the house with Ellen, and then it happened again. But this this being that it reminded me of those bluish gray monkeys, those greenish gray monkeys on the Wizard of Oz. It had
This is the one that freaks me out the most.
yeah, and
Yeah.
he had very, very long, skinny, gangly legs. And when he would step into the portal of the of that wall thing that was coming in,
It's
he would
almost like a portal.
yes, exactly. He would crouch down and he would rock. And his knees literally came up to his shoulders and he had bumpy things on his head. And when I ran across him, I was alone in the kitchen and he was looking right past me over my shoulder and I could feel that the second demon was behind me. And at that moment, I felt like my feet were stuck in cement and I prayed to be able to move and run from that house, and I did, and I got out of the house, and I ended up not going back there probably for a couple of weeks before I
Yeah.
returned again. Sometimes when you step away for a little while, you start to doubt yourself, if you're not stuck in
Yes.
the environment all the time.
Mm.
It just yeah, man, and gargoyles too. After seeing that other demon, somebody must have really seen one to be able to make gargoyles because it really looks similar to that.
Yes.
Other
Right.
than other than
Runway.
the gangly leg thing and the rocking
Mhm.
thing. But so anyway, there were the two demons and a young man in the house. I started contacting paranormal groups. I started calling churches. I went through everybody in the yellow pages. I called every church that there was. 80% of them referred me to the Catholics, even though their slogan was, what would Jesus do? And we're superior.
Right.
I thought that anybody would want to step up and take the challenge since, some people are claiming to, there's some seniority over other religions. But there were about 15% of them that basically told me that if I was attending their church, that I wouldn't be having that problem. And then there was the other 5%, that because I told them I was a single mother, they assumed that I was promiscuous and that I was drawing the demons in because of my adulterous behavior.
Yeah,
So
so there's some lack of faith or a
yeah,
morality. Joshua Dixon pointed out there, and I think you do get to this. I feel the guy who committed suicide, that had hung himself in that foyer when you
Yes.
opened the door, uh, was tortured by these evil beings, and he was a victim. Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah.
It was in all of the people that I had coming to the house. I had Georgia Paranormal come that was led by Andrew Calder, who has since passed away. I had a Presbyterian minister in the room at the same time. During that clearing, I was attacked physically. I had the hot cutting lashes that Ellen experienced in the kitchen, only on my forearm. I mean, it was hot like a skewer. I felt like I was cut to the bone, and I covered it with my hand. I was afraid to move my hand. I thought blood was going to come gushing out everywhere. And the priest saw it, and he came over and he put the cross over my hand, and the burning sensation stopped immediately. So it was definitely attack, and of course the nausea that they try to hit you with that is so overwhelming that you cannot breathe. It
Mhm.
can be that bad, that feeling of it. So I was the weak link, and I was the one getting attacked during that clearing. But he did come up the night before. He came in. He set up the infrared cameras. He did the readings, and he actually got pictures of the ghosts in the house. He wanted to know, what he was going to be up against the next day doing a clearing because people don't realize that when you're dealing with a demon, sage is not the choice.
No.
Not a good choice. It pisses them off, and makes
Yeah,
them
yeah.
react.
Yes.
There's so many people out there that defend us, and it's like their go-to thing. But
It
I have
is.
heard time and time again, you're not the only person to tell us this. Like
No.
Sage,
Yes.
if anything, is like,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now
Nope.
you've really made me mad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay to use it afterwards to clean up any of what I call the micro metastasis of the demon, or the negativity that's left, or maybe some of the negativity that drew them in to begin with. But no, it does not. It is like shooting a bear, and they will come back with a vengeance. That way, dragon's blood works better. There's some other techniques that work better. Than the sage. So if they're doing sage, they're just giving themselves enough time to get out the door, and then the poor person who's left in the house is getting attacked by demons worse, because now they're angry and coming back with a vengeance. So
Yes.
that's a couple of things that I learned. But I also learned that it's not about the age of the house. It's about the age of the ground that the house is built on. And my house, the last person that I had come was American Indian. I had multiple dimensions of religion, and really the Christians made it worse. And I'm sorry, if I'm offending anyone. I was born and raised Presbyterian. My mom did a bout with the Jehovah's Witnesses for a little while. That was terrifying. And especially being 10 years old, with the gifts that I had and the things that they told me that were wrong with me because of it. So, but it really made the situation worse in many, many cases. I had a Catholic priest that came to the house, just to back up a little bit, after the Presbyterian minister and the Georgia Paranormal Group came through. They told me that it was okay for me to take my kids back to the house, that everything was cleared out. They spent hours. They spent almost a whole day doing the blessing. They went up in the attic, they did the yard, they did everything. They had to have been there like 10 to 12 hours. And so they told me then that it was okay to take the children back. Well, I took the kids back. This time my son brought along a friend of his named Zachary, and they were playing around and running around in the yard. And all of a sudden, Zachary, I'm putting gasoline into the lawnmower to mow the grass, and Zachary comes down to the lower stairs, and he's holding his neck, on the side of his neck, and he's going this, and he's holding his neck, and he's wincing. And I'm like, what happened? Did Austin hit you? They were playing sword fight with sticks, 7-year-old boys. And, did he whack you with a stick?
Right.
Yeah. And he's like, no, he's like, I came down to the end of the bottom of the stairs, and it just hit me. And I'm like, he says, and it burns. And of course, I had to move his hand away, and there was nothing there, but then he started to retch. And I'm like, oh no. Okay. I knew between the hot burning lashes, because I had experienced that, and the nausea and the retching, I had experienced that, what exactly that was. And he was being attacked. So I sent him to the car. I called for my son and my daughter to come down, that we were leaving. I wasn't mowing the grass anymore. I was taking my kids out of there. And so my son, he came around, because he was outside and got into the car, and my daughter didn't hear me say not to come down the stairs. So she comes down the stairs, and she gets to the bottom of the stair, and she just goes, and she starts grabbing her ankle and stumbling into the room. And I said, what happened? She said, I don't know. I didn't twist my ankle. I didn't come down the wrong way. I just got to the bottom stair, and something just like hit me. It was and she couldn't bear weight. She was I had to help her to get to the car, because it was bothering her so badly. And so I got everybody loaded in the car, and we started to head down the road, and everybody started to feel better once we, got away from the house. But when I got home, I called up the priest, and I said, look, those things are still there. My kid's friend got attacked, and my daughter got attacked today. I said, I'm going to have to sell that house. And of course, he's like, well, no, 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 don't sell that house. That house is yours. You need to stand your ground in the name of Jesus Christ and tell those things to leave. And I'm like, what kind of a mother would I be if I'm sleeping and my children come into my room in the middle of the night because they're scared that something's under their bed or in their closet? And there really is.
Then there is
under
something
their bed.
there.
Really
Yeah,
is.
It's exactly, Mommy, there's a monster under the bed. And
Right.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
you just had a nightmare.
No, it's
There
this
might be something under the bed.
floating monkey gargoyle things.
Yeah, yeah. There's a couple of
it's
just a quick
freaky.
comments out here. And this is relevant, I know, to where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
Joshua says, "Hey man, same with my property. I'm on ancient Indian burial grounds or ancient Indian grounds. My house is 27 years old, but it's haunted."
Yeah.
And the point there is, I showed your house and it's our background, and it's not like this. Every haunted house has to be this old Victorian manor, with the hundreds of years of history.
Built in 1740 or something.
It can
Exactly.
be next
That's
door
my-
in your suburban neighborhood.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
cool.
A brand new house can be haunted if it's built in the wrong place. And that's what people need to understand. And a lot of these horrible things that occur that people assume create the hauntings, like the young man in my case hanging himself, I believe that the demons were there before he was, and they were the ones that egged on the demise of this young man. Also, with the third person, I was going to mention about the priest, but I'm going to skip up to the final person that I had come through, which was the Native American lady. Yeah, when they pulled up, she brought a friend with her, a male friend with her, and when they pulled up into the driveway, she got out of the car and she looked at me and she said, "If your house had been built over 3 feet over from where it is, it wouldn't be haunted." And I asked her about, I'm like, "Well, what do you mean?" And she started talking about ley lines, and mentioning that the house catty corner across the street, as well as the house behind it, were also haunted. And I said to, I started to think about that. And I mean, I had owned the house about 7 months at that point. And I remember wondering why the house catty corner, which was a rental, they had 3 families move in and out of there, 2 or 3 families move there. Yeah, in that short period of time. And I'm like, well, no wonder, at least they're renting and they can leave. And the house behind them was unoccupied. And you could tell it was a little edgy and creepy. But so she started to explain about ley lines, and which people that aren't familiar with ley lines are kind of like latitudinal and longitudinal lines that are energetic lines that are covering the whole earth. And a lot of times when people speak of ley lines, they're not only followed and traveled by alien activity, but also many very, very special pyramids and different things. Stonehenge are built along those lines because they're energetic lines. So, and also we're, for anybody, we're electric. There's a synapse, or there's a part in our heart that when the heart beats under a microscope, it actually flashes light. So we are in fact electric. So all of this energy thing does affect us. And so with that being said, make sure that you're building your house in a good place, because you may end up with unwanted guests in your house that you may not be able to get out.
Not always the easiest thing to do. The realtor doesn't show you the ley line maps. And
that's true.
Right. Sandy Griffith asked if you still live in the house. I think you mentioned at the front of the show you spent exactly 2 nights in this house.
Yes.
2 nights. I owned it for 8 months, trying to get the renovations done so that I could sell it. Moving ahead to that. Oh, I just wanted to mention this part too about the priest, because it is important. After I had the paranormal group come up and the Presbyterian minister in there, and had that attack, my children were attacked again. Of course, my kids never went back after that point. But he asked me to contact this Catholic priest that he had connected me up with, just in case I needed some additional follow-up. And so I went and I picked up the Catholic priest and was kind of telling him a little bit about what was going on as we were driving down the road. And this poor man, he was trembling so much in that lower part of that room, and I could see the spirits going up out of the ceiling of the lower room around him, and he was trembling so bad that it actually made it worse, because they feed on the negative emotions. That's where they get their fix. And when people are frightened or they're sad or they're depressed, they feed on that, and that energy gives them the ability to do more physical acts. So,
Right.
Stay neutral if you think there's one in the room. They can't read your mind. That's one thing that's good, but they go by your actions. You can start humming Amazing Grace if they're bothering you. You could, this is funny. If you want to see them hightail it out of the room and they are some form of demonic activity, tell them to come on. You're going to have a class on love. Come on in. Let me teach you about love. Talk about shrivel and run. They definitely don't want it to
Shrinkage.
because they don't have the ability to have that emotion. It's like a stink in the room. So,
Right.
It's almost funny. I mean, I'm not trying to mock or anything, but
but it's funny.
yeah, but they'll take off. But it just, and people, emotion is so important on many levels. Even when I get into the part later on about colors of heaven and how your emotions are so important to keep intact. But anyway, I told the Episcopalian priest that I couldn't stay there, that I couldn't imagine having a Thanksgiving dinner with my extended family in that house and seeing a demon walk through the room and then me standing up screaming in the name of Jesus Christ to get out of my house. How many guests would stay for dessert, for one, and how many of them would ever consider inviting me to their house?
Yeah.
I might be bringing more than chocolate cake. So, it's like I cannot, it's one thing as anybody, and even, being a single person, to have to deal with criminals at large, but having to deal with things that you can't see. Your kids come to you for help and your covers are getting pulled off. You know what I'm saying? You can't call anybody to help you with this sort of thing. And when you talk about it to people, you have to make sure that you're talking to people first that know you so that they know that you're not crazy. But
Right.
anyway,
I
I did. Go ahead. I'm
Go ahead.
sorry.
I was going to just say, just a point, and we can get into this a little bit more later. You mentioned that you had a haunted chapter, and I'm just going to throw this out there. I swear we have noticed, because we did have the pleasure of talking to a lot of people with
Yes.
paranormal
Very
experiences,
fortunate.
and it is a common factor. And I mean, it is something like 95%. I don't know what the exact percentage is, of course, but
Yeah.
we both did too as well. We have the psychic inclinations, and like you were able to identify things walking behind us, and that kind of thing. I think it all plays a role. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit more when we get into the other books, and because I know we got a lot more to talk about.
Yes. Yeah, we do. Just to kind of move forward on this, I did end up selling the house. There were some issues, and I just want to let everybody know that I did try to tell the people that I sold it to about the house, but they didn't want to hear it. I will say this. I did get the house finished as far as the renovations. I did put it up for sale by owner. I had originally made an appointment with the first set of people that wanted to come out and look at the house. And I made the mistake of making that appointment in the house where the souls in there could hear me. So the next day when my mother and I went back, we went back about an hour earlier than the people were supposed to arrive. It was a young couple with 3 kids. She had grown up in the neighborhood in a house similar to that one, and really wanted to raise her kids in a house similar to what she had grown up in. And so my mom and I, we went back to stage play, to put some towels in there and a plant so that it didn't look so empty. And when we got there, we were walking up the sidewalk to the double entry doors, and my mom says to me, she said, "Lynn, did you tint the windows?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't tint the windows." I'm looking upstairs, and there were vertical blinds hanging in there, but you couldn't even see the division. So I thought maybe I had left them open. But then when I looked down to the lower level windows, they were covered in flies. Now the lower windows were only halfway covered in flies. But then when I looked back up to the upper windows, it was almost like it was 3D, the way that they were moving in waves. There were so many flies. They were
That's
all
crazy.
over there. So I said, my mom's like, oh my God, I said, Mom, that's flies. So when we went into the house, we expected to be swarmed by the flies. But when we went in, the flies were swarming the windows because they were trying to get out too. So they had been in there so long, and these were big, mature flies. There were no maggots. There were no evidence of hatchlings. The toilet was flushed. There was no trash, no food, no cleaners. Nothing was left in that house, and we had just cleaned it. It was spotless the day before when we left. There was nothing, no odor, nothing that would draw those flies into there like that. And there was a window in the breakfast nook area that was 3 windows side by side, and they were painted shut. So they were broken with the handles, and there were flies in between the panes and the screens of those windows. And the screens were in good condition. There were no tears, there were no holes, no dents. There was no way for them to have gotten in between those panes and that the screen. I literally had to take off the screen and usher those flies into the house. And then my mom and I had to shush them out the front window. We had to take the screens off the front kitchen window and the sliding glass door we opened. And we were taking towels and flogging them, trying to get them to go out. And they had left excrement, brown spotted excrement all over the molding around the window. So they had been in there a while. And so we're racing. Here these people are supposed to be coming in on top of us. And, we're racing, trying to get this fly excrement off of the molding and getting the flies out. And I realized that it was about 15 or 20 after the time that the people were supposed to be there. I was thankful that they were running late. And then I looked at my phone and realized that they had called and left a message that they weren't coming, which I was then at that point very relieved. So when I got into the car, I called them back and I scheduled for the next day for them to come at the same time the next day, this time in my car, not in the house. And so my mom and I, we go back 2 hours ahead of time, this time to make sure that we're not walking into flies and all of that sort of chaos. So, and we went there, it was fine. It was very peaceful. It was, very beautiful inside. There were no flies, no problems. The people came. They had 3 kids. Their 2 youngest children were with them. The 3rd older son was not. And of course, the kids, just like mine did, were running down the hallway, picking out their bedrooms, and there was one bedroom that was a little bit smaller upstairs. And of course, everybody wants the biggest room. So they came up and they asked if they could go look downstairs. And of course, they were given permission. Within 5 minutes, those kids were back upstairs. They had big eyes like a deer in headlights. And I overhear the little girl saying to the little boy, Jimmy can have the creepy room downstairs. So I realized in that moment as a mother that I couldn't sell it to somebody with children, because the children could see the monsters that live downstairs. And so right after that, there were some people, a retired couple from Florida, that called. They wanted to make it their retirement home. It was a cash buy. And so everything went very, very smooth with that. But the one day that we were exiting the house, we were coming down the descending stairs to the foyer landing to leave out the front doors. And I was the first one out the door. And I overhear the wife saying to the husband, "Why did you push me?" And he said, yeah. And he said, I didn't push you. And she said, yes, you did. And he said, no, I'm 3 steps back from you. I can't even reach you, And she said, well, I don't know what happened then, because she stumbled. And of course, I knew what it was. I knew that it was what had been told to me was called a hell dog, or hellhound. And yeah, and that he was running, he was controlling the locks from the stairs. But and that's who had shoved her. I knew that's who had shoved her. So when they came out the door, my conscience got the best of me, and I said to them, I said, do you believe in ghosts? And they said, no, we are Baptist. We don't entertain that sort of thing. We don't discuss that sort of thing. We are protected. And I'm like, okay, I was very willing to tell them the truth. I didn't want to have done to them what was done to me, even though I understood why. Being a single mother, I couldn't afford, I had signed all the dotted line. I couldn't afford to pay a mortgage so that those things could live in that house. And I had to pay for somebody somewhere else for, me to live. Even if you're not a single and you're a married couple, you can't really afford to do that either. So anyway, the house sold, and that's where the first story ends. And of course, there is a self-help section book in the back of each of my books. This particular one, it tells how to take photos to determine what type of infestation you have if you feel you have one. And also, it gives some good pointers on, of course, staying neutral and some things that you can do, to protect yourself. And don't talk about them while you're in the house.
No.
So,
Also, I want to just real quick, you start your book with a prayer as well.
Yes.
It said, warning, do not. Yeah, that's the thing. Read this before you read my book. Yes.
And the reason for that is because when I first wrote the book, I had 4 of my friends who I said, hey, read this book and see. Yes, it was kind of like that, but the ears were longer and it was up on its haunches.
So I just said,
yeah, Bunny. Thanks.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it was up on its haunches. And it had a squirrel-like tail. So it had a bushy tail, and it did have a squirrel-like tail as well.
We'll find it.
I forgot what to say. Oh, yes. What was it? I had each and every page of the book blessed. That's why there's a cross at the bottom. The reason being is because my 4 friends started calling me one after the other. My lights are flickering. My kid's not here, and their toys are turning on and off in the other room, and different things. They were having negative effects from it, and I surely did not want. I wanted the information. I didn't write this for the scare factor. I wanted the information to get out there for the awareness. And even though this story will make an excellent movie someday, because it is definitely grabbing.
Absolutely.
So yeah, and it just so I requested that people, as they read it, say a prayer, any prayer that they choose. I put the Lord's Prayer in there if they couldn't think of one, and at the beginning and at the end. And I also had every single page blessed. Now, this story, while I was writing it, literally disappeared 2 times, and I had to rewrite it a 3rd time. And finally put it in an SUB that had a cross on it that actually held it this time. And so I knew that I had to do something that people would not be adversely affected by reading the book, and that worked, having that cross sealing each and every page and the prayer before and after. So that's where the first book ends. I will say that the young man spirit who was in the house was released during one of the clearings. He couldn't get it was during the clearing. I was asked to go and open the sliding glass door, and the American Indian woman told the young man to go to the light, and he ran past me so fast to get out of there. And so he was released from the house. What was I'm just watching behind you a little bit
question there. That's pretty good. Actually, like when all this is going on and you're getting ready to get out of there, it sounds like everything has gone ballistic at this point, and it's really out of control. How did you keep your energy levels up, and did you feel drained?
It's funny because I guess because of my nursing training, I've been a nurse. I've worked in end-of-life care and things like that for 17 of the 37 years that I've been a nurse. So, and not only that, I worked in urology for 3 of those years, where you're working with the belly button to the knees. And of course, everything has to look like a toe to you. You have to kind of step out of yourself and look at it in a different way. But seeing those things over and over and over again in this house, I desensitized to them, like the same way that I do as a nurse when I'm caring for someone, you know what I mean? And I have to focus on treating them and not, what's actually going on. I can't look at the gaping wound and be scared of it and say, run in the other room. I have to focus on treating it.
Right.
So with that being
great
said,
answer.
and also seeing things, pardon me?
So that's a great answer. You know, so training as a nurse, working in crisis situations to help you get through this.
Exactly. And also, you know, I grew up in a haunted house, so I got used to seeing things. We lived 4 blocks shy of a hospital that had a nursing home next door to it. So we would see, my siblings and I would see, you know, people in patients gowns walking through our house all the time that were ghosts. So you know, so we you know, we got used to seeing things early, and of course I got used to being in denial about things because after going through the religious part of it, I was afraid of what I was seeing, so I would deny it. And so I got really good at that. So I rationalized for a long time in this house, but I can't imagine if we had to sleep there, which is where the second book opens up. In the second book, about 6 months later, I was coming down the interstate from North Carolina to South Carolina, and I there was a backup on the interstate. So I jumped off the most immediate get off ramp and didn't even really pay attention at the time until I got to the end of that and realized that it was the exit that I had taken to go to that house that had temporarily been mine. So, and of course, since I never actually moved in, I never became familiar enough with the area. So I was trying to find a way that I could get back on the interstate and go around the backup that was on the interstate. And it just so happened that my venturing through the neighborhoods took me to the street that actually crossed. It didn't cross. It went down the road and you could turn off of it onto the street. So you could actually see the house from the street that I was going on because it was the second house in on the left. And so I was a little curious at that point since I was in the neighborhood anyway. So I went ahead and I said a little prayer. You know, I went turned down the street. And as I'm driving down the street, I catch out of my peripheral vision that there's a sign in the yard. And I'm wondering, you know, then my curiosity really comes up because of where it was placed. It could have been in the yard of my old house, or it could have been in the neighbor's yard. And I was curious to know what kind of sign that it was. So I went to the next street, pulled in, turned around, again, said a little prayer, please. You know, I wanted to be as inconspicuous as possible. So I turned my radio off. You know, I'm trying to be very sneaky and quiet going down the road. I turned down the road and it turns out that it's a for sale by owner sign. And 6 months later, and I'm like, you know, my heart in that moment.
Yeah.
I'm just going to pause you just for one moment. So our listeners know, and this also becomes an audio podcast. This is the second book. The first book is called Omnipresent.
Yes.
The second book is called Omnipresent, What Happened Next.
Right.
We'll get into your third book, but I want everybody to know, and the best place to get those books, I want to keep this out here, is linmonet.com, www.lynnmonet.com, linmonet.com. And you even have autograph books, is that right?
Pardon me?
You even have autograph books on your website?
Yes, I do. And I'd like to add to, I'm sorry.
Go right ahead.
If I may, the cover of the first book is a picture of a white door with kind of creepy hands coming through. And that was an actual event that happened in the house while my son at 7 years old was sitting on the master bathroom toilet. And that is what he saw coming in at him. And he actually helped me design the cover of that book because I wanted it to be exact as what he saw. I wrote the book in such a way that if ever I had to sit on a lie detector test, I would pass it with no problem because everything is stated, nothing is embellished. Everything is stated exactly as it happened. But my son is now 23 years old. And to this day, he suffered post-traumatic stress from being in that house to the point that he will not sleep without a light on in his bedroom. And so, you know, that's how it adversely affected him even to this day. So I can't imagine how awful it would have been to have slept more than those 2 nights there than what we did. So anyway, yeah. The second,
let me bring that up so people can see it.
Yep.
There it is. And you can see those kind of skeletal, long-fingered, like
Mhm.
hands just coming through the door.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
horrifying.
yeah, it is. I mean, I know a good thing he was sitting on the toilet, so
Oh,
I
Yeah,
mean,
but you're
yeah,
kind of
but
trapped too.
yeah,
Like
yeah. I was just
you
thinking
can't
that.
really like, where do you go?
yeah, exactly. And yeah, and there's a story behind that too, that my daughter actually was going into her bedroom and saw the demon coming, trying to head into the bathroom where my son was, and she grabbed a mirror, and for some reason something just told her to grab a mirror, and she started running through the room with it, and it left.
Wow.
So anyway, yeah, there's a lot of things, other things that happened in that house. Like I said, I was never able to move into it. Got multiple witnesses that saw things. It was unbelievable. But I'm thankful that the young man was released in the process of all of it. So when I,
Months later, it's for sale.
pardon me.
6 months later, after you have sold it, you've warned the owners, turned some people away because they had children. You go buy the house, as a for sale sign on it.
Yes. And my heart absolutely sunk. I had hoped that all of the things that I had tried to do to the house maybe had a delayed reaction and was effective for these people. I really hoped and prayed that their religious beliefs really did protect them as much, and maybe they had something going on more than I did, that with their beliefs that they would be able to be successful in living in that house. Maybe they weren't as sensitive as I was. So I had really hoped that they would be able to have that be their dream home for their retirement, because this was their last stop, according to what they said. And I really don't have proof for sure that the reason why they were selling it was because that it was haunted, but they bought the house to be their retirement home. They paid cash for that house. They were planning on staying there for a very long time. That was their last stop. So that's why I feel strongly that it was. And when I turned down the road to go past their street, I noticed that the neighbors across the street still had this. They had put this huge Archangel Michael statue facing the house when I lived in there, after I had told them that it was haunted, and that was still there. So I went to the end of the dead end street and had to turn around and come past the second time. And as I'm coming up the road and I get in front of the house, my radio on my car turns itself on and it blares. And I can't get it to change channels. I can't
Oh,
get
you're
it to
there.
Yes, I can't get it to do anything. And of course, everybody's going to be looking out their windows to see who the person is blaring. I left skid marks getting off that street.
I bet.
I did. I got off that street so fast, and lo and behold, as soon as I turned off, the radio shut itself off. So to me, that was like a calling card at that point, that the monsters in the house knew that I was there, and they wanted me to know that they knew I was there. And so I never ever wanted to go back, but I wanted to.
I'm just going to stop you for one more second. There's a little bit of noise in it. I know it's part of it's keeping maybe your phone, whatever you're using, steady. I do keep hearing things that sound like voices in there, but if you could keep it as steady or set it against something, that'd be good. Okay, because I'm hearing some clicks, and it's going to be an audio recording, but it's odd because I'm hearing some also like whispers in there.
Yeah, that's why I keep doing this,
which is not too unusual on this show, but especially with talking to you, hearing a couple of things. So I would try. You can just keep that as steady as possible. If there are voices, we'll hear them a little bit more clearly.
I will. I'm sorry. Thank you.
No worries.
That's fine.
Take your time. I will let you know there's no hard stop at 6. If I don't want you to feel like you got to rush. We can go a little after. We'll get through this. We want to hear about all of the books.
Okay. And forgive me, my computer camera is not working, so I've been having to use my phone. But Santa Claus is bringing me a new computer, so I have to wait until that. So,
he's a nice
guy. Yeah, he is a good guy. Curiosity. I started to realize after that happened with the radio, with my car, I I had to know, I couldn't live there. The people that lived there before me obviously moved out for the same reason. I mean, I found out from the neighbors that they had moved out 6 months before they sold it to me. And that house sat empty for 6 months. So, and now here these people are that are very, very religious, and they can't stay there either. So I decided to try to find the people that sold me the house. And I went through the court records and the county records, and found a couple of people with the same last name, and, went with the name according to what I had on the some of the paperwork that I had from the closing of the house. And so I sent out some snail mail, and I did, in fact, finally get a response from one of the letters. And the man who had sold me the house called me, and he said, "Hello there, what can I do for you?" And I told him, I said, "When you were living in the house, did anything peculiar happen?" And he's like, "Well, what do you mean by peculiar?" And I said, "Well, the house is haunted." And he came out and he said, "Haunted?" And I said, "Yes." And I started to tell him some of the things that had happened. I told him that I didn't own the house anymore. There weren't going to be any legal things taken against him for it. And so he said to me, he says, "Well, I think that you really need to talk to my wife." So I had asked, to have her call me, and a couple of days passed. Actually, it was about a week and a half passed. And finally, I didn't think she was going to call me. And I get this call from her, and she's crying on the phone. "I am so sorry that we sold you that house." She told me that they were 2.5 hours late to the closing because they were fighting. When she found out that I had children, she didn't want to sell the house to me. And they ended up doing that anyway. And you just had something walk across the front of you. But anyway, I'm watching this happen here. So when she did call me back, we started to compare notes. We started, talking about different things that had happened in the house. There was one room, the smaller bedroom upstairs, had a glaze of feces smeared on the subfloor. And she had mentioned, yeah, pardon me?
It's a good
Oh
God.
my God.
Yes. Yeah. When they pulled up the carpet, you could smell it. It just, and it was just glazed, like every part of the floor was covered in it. So it turns out that the house had been bank owned when they bought it. It didn't have flooring in it, like flooring covering. And she had an uncle that had a carpet place that gave them some like off-white colored carpeting to put in the house. And she said that there was dried feces on the floor in that bedroom that she had tried to clean up, like chunks of it, trying to clean it up. She felt that whoever had lived there before must have had puppies or some kind of an animal in that room that was going
the
to
hellhound.
Yeah, you never know. Was, leaving excrement all over in that room, and that she cleaned it up the best that she could. And then when I come and pull up the carpet and find it, then I have to clean it again before the wooden flooring's going down. But then we started to talk, and she was telling me how that house almost ruined her marriage, because there were times that her husband would work midnights and need to sleep during the daytime. She worked at a bank. She worked at a bank that was inside of a Walmart, and he worked at the Walmart. But sometimes he would need to sleep during the daytime, and something would knock on the door and wake him up, and he would hear her voice, saying something to him, and so he would get angry and think that she had come home and want to know, why she was trying to wake him up. And she would be like, "I wasn't even here. That didn't happen." And so different things happened, but they had a daughter that was 4 and a little boy that was 6. And the little girl, of course, was talking about the things downstairs. And at first they thought, at 4 years old, that might just be an imaginary friend or something like that. But the things that she was describing were creepy sounding. So and also, she started showing up with bruises that were unexplainable and claw marks and things like that. And one day the mom asked her, she said, "What happened? Where did you get, the bruise from?" And the little girl came out and she said, the monsters downstairs don't like me. And said that the monster downstairs had done it. And within that same period of time, the son had gone to school and the teacher had the children draw and color, a picture of their house and their family. And he had drawn a house and he put his family, in there. But then off to the side, he drew these 3 creepy looking beings. And when the family asked when he brought it home, who are these? He says, those are the monsters that live downstairs.
Jeez.
He even told the teacher that, those are the monsters that live downstairs in my house. So, these children were seeing these things and they were being attacked by these things. And as things went on, they actually ended up moving back in with their parents or whoever it was that they were living with. When the closing happened, they ended up trying to get groups of people to come through there and do clearings. And they even, in the last 6 months, they actually held church services in the house, hoping to, deter and get the things out. And they had actually moved back in at one point, and within a couple of days, the water was turning itself on and off. The lights were turning themselves on and off. Just crazy things were happening. And the second time that they moved back in, they also had a dog. And the dog didn't like going into the house either. And at one point, the husband had opened the door to go out, and the dog darted out of the house and ran down the street into traffic and was hit by a car. They ended up losing their dog. But so, they ended up moving. But it just, that house, a lot of times, people were like, well, it's something with you. And it's like, no, it's not me. Where I go back to live, it's fine there. It's this house that there's something wrong with. And those people couldn't stay there, either.
All right. Joshua Dixon commented there that it needs to be burned down or move it a few ley lines over, and the county approves, but who could afford to move it even a little bit?
Right. And I agree with you. I would have loved to have burnt that house down to the ground. But again, I couldn't afford to pay a mortgage on a piece of property that I couldn't live in. So, I just, and in the state of North and South Carolina, you have to disclose whether a death has occurred, but you don't necessarily have to, mention whether a house is haunted or not. So, and in this case, it had gone through so many changes of people that they couldn't even tell me how old the roof was, let alone whether somebody had died in there or not.
Wow.
So, it was, that is what was happened. So I started to talk about, these things happening with people. And, it's you would expect to get a lot of hate mail for this kind of thing, especially since I live in the Bible Belt. I have not gotten not one piece of hate mail. I have gotten so much email from people begging for help this is a real problem out there. And so, people, when they're in that sort of a desperate situation, they could very easily be taken advantage of. If somebody comes to your house and says, pay me $1,000 and I can get these things out, you'll do it. It's not like you're desperate to have it done. And it's not like you can call up the Ghostbusters or have the police come and take care of the problem, and so that you can move in. Your house is your sanctuary, but in the case of something like that, it's not. And sometimes it never will be. And you do have to move. But the stories in that book, there are several interesting things. It does talk about some stories that were shared with me by people who also, this one lady in particular, she had a best friend that bought a house in East Flat Rock that was not able to stay there. Her niece bought a house in East Flat Rock, which was in North Carolina, where I bought mine, actually within about a half a mile from where I bought my house. She wasn't able to stay there either. And these stories are very, very interesting in the book, as well as I talk about addiction and mental illness and how it relates to demonic possession. So when I when I went through my nursing, I went back to school later in life to further my degree as a nurse. And we had to do a rotation through all of the areas, maternities, med surg, and psychiatric. So when I had to go through my rotation through the psychiatric ward, there was we went in one day, there were 8 nurses there with a teacher, and there was a young lady there who approached our group, and she looks at me and she points at me and she says, "You can help me. I know you can." And of course I'm embarrassed, and I'm like, I'm looking over my shoulder, kind of hoping that she's talking to somebody else. And she wasn't. She was pointing at me, and I'm like, look, I just want to be Lori the nurse today, and Lynn the nurse today. I don't want to be, something else, the one that sees ghosts. So the teacher came up, told us not to make eye contact, and she ushered us out of the room. And I ended up getting reassigned into that area. Now, it was the intake area of a psychiatric ward. We had to sign papers. It was myself and another nurse to go back in there. We had to sign papers that if we were harmed in any way or hit or shoved or whatever, we couldn't hold the facility responsible. And so we did. And of course, there were a lot of combative people in there because their medications were being balanced and things like that. But we were each assigned suicide watch patients. And at one point, our clients had to go for their meeting with they had like group meetings for them to go to. And so ours went to theirs. We were sitting down. They had wooden picnic tables that were bolted to the floor in the sitting area. So we were sitting there doing our charting, and this young woman approaches us, and she sits down with us, and she starts talking about her life. And she was telling about how when she was about 10, that her pastor started molesting her until she was about age 14. And then her mother got remarried to her stepfather, who confronted the pastor, and they ended up getting kicked out of the church. And then he started molesting her until she ran away at about age 16, and that she started to do Satan worship. And she said that she realized that wasn't necessarily the route to go either, but that now she hears 25 different voices, and she was actually admitted to the facility with schizophrenia. So we're sitting there talking, and I'm looking at this young woman. She's just been brought in. She is covered in scratches. I mean, she had scratches coming out of her ear canal, out of her nose. She had on a tank top with spaghetti straps. So she had scratch marks on her back in areas that would have been impossible for her to reach. She even said that one of the voices had a long nail that would scratch the inside of her vagina. And she said that the doctors believed that she was inflicting these scratch marks on herself. And I recognized those claw marks because they looked just like the ones that I saw on my friend Ellen in the kitchen. And so I'm looking at her, and I'm like, holy crap, holy Toledo. Yeah. She's got claw marks. Those are demonic claw marks on her, and there's no way that she could reach those spots. So about a couple of minutes later, we were listening the other nurse and I were listening to her story, and the other nurse said a prayer for her. And the girl got up to walk away because it was her meeting with her psychiatrist that she needed to go to visit with. And when she got up to walk away, because of being left with the ability to see those things over and over that I had reawakened in the house that we were living in, not living in the house that I had bought. When she got up to walk away, I could see on her back attached there, they looked like clusters of grapes in it, like a clear pillowcase sized bag. They were about the size of potatoes, but they were clustered like grapes, one over each shoulder of her. And they were faces. Some of them were inverted. You could see the eyes on the bottom and the mouth on top. And I remember looking and thinking to myself, oh my God, she really is hearing 25 voices. She's got attachments on her back.
Yeah.
From talking to her. So when she came back from her meeting, I went to her room. I knocked on the door. She let me come in. And I told her, I said, listen, you have attachment. You have demonic attachments on your back. And when you leave here, you need to go and find someone that can help you with those to remove them and to protect you from having them, reattach. And I'm looking at them on her shoulder. And of course, at that time, I had some personal things that were going on, and I didn't really feel spiritually stable enough at that time to take on the task myself. And plus, I didn't want any of those things coming home with me.
Yeah,
So but it was attached to the top of her shoulder, and it looked like a vine that was made out of the material that a horn is made out of. And it was connected at the top of each shoulder and partially underneath the armpit. It kind of was like a clasp, like a C shape that was clasping. And something just told me to pick them off. So I reached down, put my fingers underneath them and pulled them off of her back, threw them to the ground, stomping them into the ground. I don't know where I had the nerve to do that, but something just helped me and they came off. She told me that they looked like, that it felt like weeds were being pulled off of her back when I did that. I was very, very surprised at how easily they did come off, but some of them did roll away, and I could see where she had clustering around her bed area that she was sleeping in. And I told her, I said, listen, these things can come back on you. I didn't get them all. When you leave here, you need to find someone that can help you. Lo and behold, about a year later, I'm in Walmart. And I'm in the aisle, and these two young ladies are like at the end of the aisle. And I keep hearing one saying to me, I know that's her. Finally, she says, I'm going to go up and say something. So this young woman approaches me. I'm thinking, well, maybe they know about my books. I'm overhearing them. And she comes up and she says, do you remember me? And I looked at her, and at first she looked a little familiar, but I didn't really place her because she looked so different. She had lost weight. She had beautiful hair. She had on her makeup. She looked completely different than the zombie that she looked like in the facility. And she said, you were the student nurse that was on the facility that told me to get help. And I looked at her and it clicked. And I'm like, oh my God. I said, you look amazing. She said, I did exactly what you said. She said, and you were right. She said, in the some kind of shaman or priest that she had helping her told her that if I hadn't pulled those things off of her that she had on her, even that much, that she would have ended up staying in the mental facility longer. And she said that the doctor had at that point had reduced her medication to some lower anxiety medication and had taken her off of all of the schizophrenic medication, that she was no longer hearing the voices. She had taken her GED. She had just gotten accepted into school to become a dental hygienist. And she was just I was so proud, of her, that it was successful. But with that experience and going back into the time frame, once I realized what I was looking at on her, I started to walk through the facility looking at other people in a different way. And I call it look. So I started to notice people with archons on their backs. I started to notice people with attachments on their backs similar to hers. And most of those people that were similar to hers were diagnosed with schizophrenia. Now, there were some people, and they're talking about pink elephants climbing on the wall. And yes, there are people with dopamine and other types of serotonin level dysfunctions that do need medication and help. But the ones that are talking about voices, people's voices, and sometimes voices that they recognize, that's a little bit different and could very well, in my experience and what I saw, be attachments. Now, some of the other ones that were in there for drug addiction carried archons. Sometimes they look reptilian or spider-like. They carry like backpacks on their back. They also have that similar attachment of that horn-like vine that attaches at the top of the shoulder and underneath the arm, as well as they have like an implant around the hip area that also connects in, that I've seen.
Let's talk about that. I'm sorry, let me just stop you there a little bit, just to talk about what that looks like when you say an archon. And you're seeing, what are you seeing? How would you define that? And are you seeing it in a hazy way? Do you see it very clearly? What are your abilities like that you're seeing? This fascinates me, especially in the realm of schizophrenia.
Yes.
We do often talk about
mental
spirit,
and
release therapy,
Yes.
as just being this really possibly legit
It is.
way of treating some people that are mentally
Mhm.
ill. I'm very fond of like the work of Dr. Terrence Palmer. We talk about him on the show,
Mhm.
as well as other people. Tell us about that.
Okay.
What do you see them?
Again, out of my peripheral vision, I can see them solid.
What's like
I can see them solid. The spiders. That's why I say they look like spiders. They can look reptilian, kind of lizard-like.
Mhm.
Sometimes they have a tail that kind of wraps around. Sometimes they have a human butt appearance, but yet they still have that lumpy alligator look to their back, only in the center area. They have like 4 digits on their foot limbs. Their elbows, kind of when they're huddling, as they fit like a backpack or like a turtle shell on somebody's back. And like I said, they attach with those horn type things that connect at the shoulders, and then they like connect up underneath the arm as well. I can see them clearly out of my peripheral vision. They sometimes kind of illuminate with almost a neon green color in my peripheral vision. When I look at them directly, I can see, like, for instance, sometimes their face, because they have actual head kind of things to them. Even the spider-like one has a spider body, but it has a head to it that will kind of peek up around the shoulder sometimes, or it aligns its head directly with the person's head, but it can peek around. I've seen that as well. They have, similar to human faces, they have a thing about their upper lip that almost looks like a mustache, but it's not, but it's like a color change above the lip area on some of the faces. And they all have this distinct thing about their head where there's like from the top of the head to the back, it comes out like a triangle, and it's floppy. So sometimes when these people that have addictions and they've gone through treatment, the archons will remove themselves from the back, but they never go away. They will still remain in the person's home. I've seen them jumping on ceilings from corner to corner, and they can turn their head all the way around, and that floppy fold that's on the back of their head kind of flaps over their face a little bit. And the thing is too is that the head, in proportion to the body, the head is much smaller than the body itself. And that is what I can see. And a lot of times people who have addictions, drug addiction and things like that, will carry those. A lot of times people get involved with drug addiction innocently because there is a pain that is also caused by an implant, some kind of an implant or demonic thing. In my first book, it talks about how my daughter was struggling with pain, and I thought it was her book bag, so I got her a rolling book bag. And when the lady came to my house, the Indian lady came to my house, she said that, has your daughter been complaining of pain? And I said, well, yeah, how did you know? And she's like, well, because she's got an attachment on her back, and it's a big one too. And she did this motion energetically where she snapped her fingers and pulled it off. And I said to my daughter, I said, move your arms around. And she started moving them like a helicopter. I mean, she hadn't been able to do that. And I said, are you still having pain? And she said, no. So she had an archon on her back. And sometimes these things that implant themselves on you to create pain, you of course seek relief for the pain. So you may then start taking a medication that you wouldn't have normally taken because before, when you didn't have pain. And then this creates a cycle of addiction. With the addiction, it then causes a rippling effect within the families, because that drug addiction then has an adverse effect within the family, that the demonic archons, the demonic attachments, they feed off of that negative activity. It's their candy. So they create these situations where they can do this. I've also mentioned in my book too, there's not a diagnosis or a for sure cause of SIDS, but I can tell you, after being attacked, having my hair pulled, having people pushed, they have enough strength when they are active to smother a newborn child with that's on their stomach that, you know, can't hold their head up. I believe that is what, you know, I believe that could be part of it. And this again creates that chaos and that rippling effect of sadness and mourning and all of that they feed off of, like
all
candy.
that emotion, right?
Yes, they need that. And they need it so that they can do more physical acts. And then they literally, you know, they can make people's ill elements exacerbate if they have some, you know, negative beings in their house or whatever. And so it's important. I really wish that medicine would start to look at people, say, for instance, with schizophrenia in a different way. They really need to have a spiritualist there along with the medical doctors and a psychiatrist, you know, to determine whether,
aware, maybe a medium that can see,
and
you know, and be able to remove it. A lot of times, at least what I've been told is that they can talk them away. They can just ask them to leave, but they don't, you know, science doesn't believe it, and they're even more resistant to take people off any kind of medications they're on that may be contributing to some of the problems and vulnerabilities.
Absolutely.
Their own psychic aura and energy and really their field protection.
And it's a vicious cycle, and you're absolutely right. You know, and it's amazing how many people that I saw that were in that mental facility that really I don't think needed to be there, you know, because of what I was seeing connected with them. So and it is, you know, it is very, very I'm hoping, you know, I'm hoping that there are some ways that will start, you know, people will start to put into play in treating, you know, these people. And maybe if somebody's got schizophrenia, the family can take them and find a spiritualist or somebody that might be able to determine that if the doctors can't. You know, I'm not saying for them to take them off their medication right away, but even, you know, schizophrenia truly does not have a medical diagnosis. They think they know what causes it. They don't know if it can be caused through hereditary means. They don't know for sure what causes it. They're just medicating the symptoms that go with it. And there are a lot of mental ailments that are that same way. So they really, really don't know. And it just, you know, learning what I've learned and being able to even see some wonderful things on the flip side of that will be coming out in the Colors of Heaven. But I want to back up one more thing that was kind of funny. People also don't realize too, when I was writing the book Colors of Heaven, I started to talk about the part about when souls choose not to cross over. And it started to take on a little bit of a darker turn, which is why I wrote Omnipresent, What Happens Next. And, you know, people don't realize, even with addiction and things like that, how many lost souls that have chosen not to cross over are standing around them at their sports bar cocktail hour or at their cigarette break outside with a group of people that are standing trying to smell the fumes. You know, their residual addiction has kept them earthbound because they've chosen to. Because one thing that I have learned is even when people pass away, there have been a lot of near-death experiences that people talk about the sense of heaven. They talk, and I'm saying heaven cross the other side. There are multiple names for it. Yeah. I mean, but they all mean the same thing. They're all going to the same place, whatever your title, you know, your title is for that. But, and again, you know, death means something different to everyone, the same as living does. So there are all of those definitions. But again, they all kind of come to the same part of it. But people would be absolutely shocked if they could see all of the dead people standing around them in a bar or in their cigarette break or at the adult peep show. You know, if somebody, the thing about lost souls that do not cross over is they still have their residual addictions. If they did, they have their mental illness, they have the cause of death showing. So if it's somebody that's been, say, decapitated in a car, they're carrying their head. They can be very gruesome to see these things. Somebody that's had cancer or cirrhosis of the liver, it generally shows up to me like Swiss cheese looking in that area. So I know that it's been a corrosive type disease that caused their demise. A lot of times people choose not to cross over because maybe there's a loved one that they've been caring for, maybe somebody that's disabled or a spouse that they expect to pass before them because of some kind of disease they have, and then they don't. They go first.
Right.
So sometimes they'll choose to hover for that. Other ones will choose to stay because maybe their upbringing has led them to believe that something that they did in their life, they don't want to meet their maker, or they don't want to leave their addiction behind. But the thing is,
or they're like if they built a house and they're very attached to the house, they don't want to leave the house because they built it and that's theirs.
They may simply want to stay with the family in that house.
Exactly.
That's true.
But I'm going to just make a real quick comment because you mentioned things like peep shows, I could talk, and bars. And I know classically there was a term, and remember we talked about this a long time ago. The English have a term for this, and I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but it describes these little gargoyles that people would see that would hang over the doorways of bars in particular.
Yes.
And that would attach to them.
As they were coming out of the bar, they would
I need to find that name because that's so interesting and so relevant.
Something like that.
It's similar to like the archons.
And I think Ireland, or it wasn't, but look at the story straight.
Yeah, but there it is.
But,
and then of course you have
the
the peep shows and those kind of things. But now we have the internet. So you got to look at that, right? And we know from our paranormal experience that all an earthbound spirit needs to do, from the other side, right in front of you, is have the intent to control some sort of electronics, not unlike a cat ball or whatever that's going off up there occasionally. They simply need to intend it, and it's why applications that people use, like on their phones and stuff, I used to think was complete bullshit, for lack of a better word. And then I started to see it work, and I went, well, wait a minute here. And I've got it in airplane mode. There's no way it's doing it, and we're getting relevant answers from application. So it becomes real evident that they simply need to intend it. Not unlike, prayer, witchcraft, magic, sorcery, anything else. The power of attention in those thoughts seems to carry over post-mortem.
Yeah.
Yes, it does, especially when they haven't crossed over. Now, when they've crossed over, they become more than perfect, their perfect selves. Their cause of death doesn't show. They still keep all 5 of their senses, which is why they can talk about heaven smelling. But going back to the lost souls here, those are the ones that are haunting people's houses. The ones that have crossed over can come and go as they please. Then they're not the ones that are going to be shaking your bed in the middle of the night, scaring you. They can enter your dreams whenever they want to. So, it definitely, and not only that, people don't realize in the peep show that they think they're getting their private moment, but they've got a whole fan club in there watching with them. They're not having, that moment alone that they think they are. And old habits die hard. These people cross over. I mean, they don't cross over, but they're walking around on our plane without bodies, and, their habits die hard. So, I had made mention to you, we were talking before about an apartment building. It was actually a townhouse building that I had moved into after this all happened. I had gotten married.
Crazy story. Right after you out of that house, you go to this one.
Yeah, well, yes. I after I got out of the other house, I ended up marrying for a second time. I had a 3rd child. And then that marriage didn't work out. So in the divorce, I ended up having to leave the marital home. I ended up renting a larger townhouse with my son. And anyway, it didn't work out. It became more expensive than what I could afford. So I was anxious for the lease to end. And in the process of that, I was looking for somewhere to move with my daughter. And because my son was of age at that point in time that he didn't need to move with us, even though he ended up moving with us. But anyway, so I was looking for a place with my daughter, and I came across this renovated townhouse building that was an older building, but it was, it was very, very well renovated. It looked nice. It was modernized. And I, walked through with the pictures. I didn't actually go there. And I ended up agreeing to meeting the person to sign the lease with the check for the house. So I never actually got to walk through there or sense anything with that. And, when new people come in, they kind of behave themselves for a little while first. They kind of wait for you to get settled before they start creating havoc. But so I went ahead and I signed. I gave the money for this house, and I started bringing boxes over. And I noticed that the townhouse was not cleaned. I mean, the inside of the oven was still nasty. The toilet wasn't cleaned, and I sure wasn't going to clean it. It was supposed to be clean for me to move in. I'm not cleaning up somebody else's urine on the toilet. Yeah. So anyway, I called and complained and asked them to have the maid come back and clean, and went round and round trying to get this maid person. And finally she called me, and I was driving. I had to pull over into a parking area, and she told me, she said, I want to warn you, don't move into that townhouse. And I'm like, well, why? And she said, well, because it's haunted. She said, and that one's the worst one. And I had been there earlier that day, and I had been putting some clothes away in the closet. And I did see this apparition of this young little girl, about 7 years old, very old timey, with the little button side shoes. She had on a white or off-white dress with a pinafore that was the same color. She had her hair pulled back in a bow with part of it flowing down. And I saw her in the doorway as I was putting away my clothes. I even said something to her, and she finally ran off. So when the maid lady spoke to me on the phone, I said, well, are you talking about the little girl? And she said, yeah, there's a little girl, but that's not the problem. The problem is the tall, slender man with the black eyes that mumbles in the bathroom. Oh, and so there was somebody in there. With that being said, I actually found a technique to get him out and to keep the ghost out of my realm while I was living there. But the problem is that it turns out that there were several single women living in this string. There was a row of townhouses. There were 10 of them in the thing. They were side by side. And one night my dog had awakened me. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I hear this woman talking on the phone outside in the back, and I go to let my dog out to go to the bathroom, and I hear her saying, I've got to get off the phone. My neighbor's out here. And she came over and she asked me if I would go into her house with her. And I thought that was kind of weird, but then she started to explain what had been happening. And she was telling me that several nights she had been sleeping. Her roommate was staying at the boyfriend's house, and she was there by herself, and that she would wake up multiple times and find her underwear pulled down halfway, pulled down mid-thigh, sometimes half cocked on the hip. And she said, I wasn't sleeping with anybody, and I wasn't getting busy with myself. She says, I was in there sleeping. She said, and I'm waking up and I'm finding my underwear in these weird positions. And so she said this one particular night, which was the night that she was out there on the phone, she said that the actual tugging of her underwear woke her up. And she thought that someone physical was in her house getting ready to rape her. And she sat up and found that there was no one there. There was nobody in the room. She turned on the light. There was nobody there. So she laid back down to go to sleep. And of course, she was still unnerved and felt uncomfortable. And so she just kind of laid there awake, pretending that she was sleeping. And then she felt the actual tugging on her underwear. Her hands were up near her face. With her pillow, and she felt something tugging at her underwear. So she ran out of the house. She didn't want to go back in there, alone. So it turns out I have a picture in my book of the naked man ghost that was going from apartment to apartment, pulling women's underwear down and crawling in bed with them, having sex with them. Also, they'd wake up or during the act, and all they could move was their eyeballs, and every body part on them was frozen, but they could feel the movement of somebody laying on them and the feeling of something moving inside of them for female purposes. And we started to talk. I go right up to people. I don't have a problem with that. And so there were several other women in the building that lived alone, that either had boyfriends that didn't live with them or that were gone a lot or whatever. And we started talking and comparing notes, and come to find out all of the women were having the same experience with finding their underwear half cocked and pulled down in this apartment building.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to take that. That's only one chapter in the book of the 1 year that I lived there, but I'm actually going to write a book on that one because people need to be aware of that sort of thing and that it can happen. There's also women that it's a fetish that they like having sex with ghosts.
They do.
Yes.
They call it spectrophilia.
Yes.
Is a term for that, right? They're kind of digging the ghost action, if you will.
That's right. And I can't imagine anybody wanting to bring that in on themselves because, it just,
why would you
just scary.
Want to manifest something like that?
No, because it opens the door for many others to come in as well. And, they're going to get more than they bargained for and may not be able to get them to, to go back out.
Right. Like our friend Joshua Dixon had said, it's like incubus.
An incubus.
Yes.
Yeah, and just a note there too. Joshua also mentioned a little before that, and I thought this was interesting.
The tablet.
His tablet was acting extremely strange when he turned it on during the podcast, so I turned it off. But even that, he had trouble, I guess, even turning it off. And I want to give a big thank you to Joshua and all the folks in chat tonight, just staying with us. I see everybody still joined, and we're just adding more people. Hi to Irene Takura from Japan. Our good friend Anne Marie Young. Hi to Gail Hyson. Thank you for the messages, and I'm glad David likes that book, and that's great. We can't wait to talk to you. I believe Gail is going to be on our Dark Horse Paranormal podcast next Thursday. Just want to put that out there.
Small, medium, at large.
From the podcast Small, Medium, at Large, which you can find on YouTube and other places. She's awesome. She has a great show. Liz Milne from Scotland. Great to see you again, Liz. We appreciate it. And thank you for sharing, especially folks out there sharing the show. We really appreciate your support. Paranormal Discovery Wales. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're also another sharer. So they're all listening. This is great stuff. We're talking about now incubus phenomena. Fantastic. We've covered so many things. We don't have a hard stop. And as long as you're good, Lynn, to talk some more, we're here for you.
I'm good, and I also want to finish on a positive note, more so than the dark stuff. But just to finish up the dark stuff, there are famous paintings, and the one has slipped my mind back in the 1700s that was painted, where many times you'd see these incubuses perched over men and women in pictures that were sleeping unsuspecting things. So this is something that's been happening for centuries. Yes. So it just and when women come forward and they're accused of doing it to themselves and making it up. And I mean, I couldn't imagine being raped to begin with by a physical person is so traumatic and awful, but then to be raped by something invisible where you can't get the support, that even a woman that has been raped physically can get, and it's blamed on you. I can't imagine how awful that must be, and I mean, and some of the times these women have been left with bruises, terrible bruises on the inside of their thighs.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, this could be, it's something a mental health practitioner might start to think like, oh, there's no evidence of this rape, or you hurt yourself, you bruised yourself. There's just something wrong with you. Then the next thing you know, they're taking away your children, or they've lost their job. And schizophrenia is such a dark label. It can ruin a life. Just don't want that attached to you, right?
Yes, that's absolutely.
And that's going to cycle into a worse situation.
That's true. And it creates the depression. And sometimes the person, they can't take it. They can't take it. So they end themselves, and that's kind of the goal of the whole demonic is spiral downward. But anyway, with that, there's a lot more written in the book on this subject. It does talk about interdimensions and things like that. But going into my book, this is actually on pre-sale right now. It'll be coming out more the middle of January. There's been a little bit of a delay with the COVID thing and getting things edited and printed. So I had to set it back about a month. But The Colors of Heaven is a beautiful story about what crossing over, death and dying. And there are a lot of things that my entire family has been riveted with cancer. So my mother, my father, my brother are on the other side. My sister was shot in the head by a jealous boyfriend. She is also on the other side, so I communicate with them frequently. But some beautiful things, you know, being a nurse in end of life care, there have been some consistent things. I've seen probably 100 people cross over and go through the active transition from life into the other side. And there's some consistencies to it that if people could step out of their emotion, and I know that during the time of loss, you know, people are grieving greatly and things like that. But what they don't realize is, like, for instance, when Grandma's talking to Uncle Joe that passed away 5 years ago, you know, everybody thinks that she's hallucinating, or they'll see her smiling and reaching up to the sky, into the air for something that she can see, that something's being handed to her, but no one else can see it. Everybody runs to get the drugs because they think she's hallucinating. And even the doctors will ask you, has she started hallucinating?
Yes.
Well, yeah, she's not hallucinating. The souls are really, really in the room with you. And the thing is if you can get past the fact that you're freaking out because she's talking to Uncle Joe who died 5 years ago, and say, hi, Uncle Joe, you may very well get a response through your loved one from Uncle Joe. You know, so many times in life, people say, I wish I could just tell so-and-so one more time that I love them, or to tell them I'm sorry, or to ask so-and-so where he put the clock, you know, for that matter. And this is an opportunity for you to do this. And people miss out on this opportunity because they're in their grieving, or because the fact of having a dead person in the room in addition to your loved one that is crossing over makes you feel very, very uncomfortable. The thing about spiritual activity, and again, going back to what I had mentioned earlier about keeping your emotions on an even keel, is that when loved ones come forward to collect the loved one that is departing, and they do this, especially when the death is a natural death, there are loved ones, they prepare a reception for them. They come to help them cross over at their time of death. You will hear them talking to them. People, they miss out on this window because partially because too, if they do say something to Uncle Joe and Uncle Joe responds, they immediately go, oh my God, he said something. But what they don't realize is that because these angels are, and these beings are on such a much higher vibration than we are, they have a tendency to not come as close during a time of sorrow or anger or grieving, because they can exacerbate the situation and make it more intense. So they kind of step back. So it's really, really important that you keep control of your emotions around any kind of spiritual being, whether it's demonic or angelic type thing, unless it's a good emotion. Of course, you know, you want to be happy, we can be happier. But yeah, in order to be able to communicate with them, it's a window that so many people miss. That's such a beautiful time, why the veils are effacing between the dimensions to be able to communicate with loved ones on the other side. So this is what this book is about. Again, also, I was in the room actively with my mother when she passed away. And I'll share that with you. That's the main reason why I started to write the book, and also realizing what a need there is, because so many people suffer so much when they lose someone. And I'm really, really hoping that this book will take the stigma of death and dying away, and to help bring comfort to those who have lost a loved one or someone who's been diagnosed with terminal illness, that this will truly, truly open up a new dimension for them, and for that matter, that they you know, it's not going to be as scary, and that stigma kind of leaves. But my mother had cancer. She had decided to stop treatments a year before she passed away. So we had a wonderful year together where she checked off some things on her bucket list. We also made a pact at that time that during times of stress, which I was going through a divorce at that time, so life was stressful, that I wanted to have an agreement with her on a way that she could communicate with me from the other side when I was too stressed out to notice that she was there. So we agreed that she had this long, beautiful white pearlescent hair that was waist length, and
Wow.
I asked her to leave one of her hairs whenever she would come to visit. And of course, obviously, my family were all brunettes, whether it's from the bottle or not. We were originally brunettes. So anyway, so her white hair, her white pearlescent hair was very unique to her, and it was wavy. So when she passed away, the day of her funeral, I found a hair. I drew a bath. I put some bubbles in it, and laying on top of that bath bubbles in a straight line was one of her hairs. I found one of her hairs this past Thanksgiving laying across the dining room table seat at Thanksgiving.
Oh, wow.
I to this day, I have moved multiple times. I have a completely different car than she ever rode in, and I'm still to this day finding those hairs. And there's one thing in particular. There was one day that I was under a lot of stress. I had a test at school. It was very, very hard. And I went to the school bookstore and I purchased a 3-ring binder and these loose leaf papers that were to go in it. And I took it back to the classroom. I took it straight to my car, straight to my classroom, took it out on my desk, pulled it out, opened it up, and I would fight God for my children. And I swear to you, on my children's lives, what I'm telling you happened. And in that middle ring of those 3 rings, in the teeth of that middle ring, looped multiple times, was a beautiful white pearlescent hair. There is no way, there is absolutely no way that hair could have gotten there. The car that I drove, she had never been in. She had been gone for about 2 years. There is no way. She put it there to let me know that she was supporting me during my very stressful time. And to this day, I am still finding those hairs. You can make an agreement with them, even if they've passed over. I mean, they can hear you just as plain as I'm talking to you. It's just that they communicate telepathically. And of course, on the other side, they have a very good sense of humor, because a lot of times when people are newly passing over, when they see things, they have a few choice words in their mind and not realizing that it's radiating out like over a megaphone to everybody. So of course, the guy sees Jesus for the first time and says, "Holy shit," he thinks that nobody's hearing it, but you get that aha moment or that sort of thing until they learn. So they do have a good sense of humor over there. They also, as I mentioned, you do keep your senses over there. You can still smell things. Heaven does have a scent that's individual to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
My mother, and I will go into the part of her passing that was very beautiful. My mother, once she had passed away, she would always make the Thanksgiving turkey every year. And this year it was my first time making the Thanksgiving turkey this particular year. And I'm in the kitchen and I can hear her as plain as if she's standing next to me in the kitchen. And she says, "Don't forget to put the aluminum foil on the turkey." Well, I'm like, nah, I want one of those nice brown turkeys like the kind they have on TV. Well, I found out real quick that the breast got burnt and that my legs were raw. So that's why I needed the aluminum foil to even out the cooking. And we ended up having hamburgers that year.
Oh my God.
I remember too saying to my mom, I asked her, I said, "Mom, don't you ever miss?" My mom made this really unique potato salad that was really, really good. And I said, "Don't you ever miss the taste of potato salad and the brownies that you used to make?" And my mom came through again, as plain as day. She said, "Well, we don't eat things here." She said, "However, if we think of them, the sensation and the flavor comes to us as if we are eating them, the same as if we are eating them." And I'm thinking to myself, wow, wouldn't that be nice to have here? You can eat whatever you want and, not gain any calories or weight. So they still have the enjoyment of some of the things that they had on Earth.
And the experience. And I'm sorry,
Yes.
just some questions, comments.
Yeah.
Let me just throw a couple things out there, kind of relevant to what you're saying. There's something called a dumb supper, which is when you set up a table for. Dumb is probably the wrong, well, it's the right word, but it's not used like you think it is. Where you set up a plate for somebody who has passed on. You mentioned smells and tastes and things. I know one way, if you're trying to communicate with like a past relative or somebody you were close with, whoever that may be, to try to recreate a moment with them where you have the same smells and the same lighting or something that they liked, and you want that in the same room if you're trying to have some sort of communication. Because would you say that it's a different kind of communication with like a deceased loved one than say somebody that is just an earthbound spirit that's passing through your home?
It's still telepathic. The difference, it is still telepathic. Although the lost souls that are here, sometimes their mouth will move when they're trying to convey certain things, but it is telepathic. But I agree with you that setting up the scene is something that will draw them in. But the thing is, too, is that they're around us all of the time. Some things that I've learned is that they can be 6 places simultaneously and equally with that. My father had a near-death experience and talked about when he was in the tunnel before they sent him back, which people that go into the tunnel when they cross over are usually going to be sent back. So if you hear them talking about being in the tunnel with the glistening lights, at some point they usually are sent back. But he talked about being with each of his children, the 5 remaining children out of the 6 that he had, and his new wife. So, and he even went so far as to tell me what I was wearing that day. And he was right. I had this favorite shirt that had pastel stripes on it. And I lived in a different state at that time. He had never seen me wearing it. So, he was correct in the way that he described it before he was sent back. But he also got to visit with my sister Robin on the other side, who was the one that was shot. So,
sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I was going to say the dumb part, by the way, means silent, and it's a pagan tradition.
Silent, yes.
It's like a silent supper. Some other comments here. Joshua said, every time I ask my brother to appear, he does as an owl. We both love owls, and my dad appears as a hummingbird. Stuff like that. Go ahead.
Yep, that's very, very true. And the thing with the dinner, a lot of times people too, what they don't realize is they'll say, oh gosh, I wish that so-and-so was here to see this, the wedding or the graduation or the new baby. And what they don't realize is they are in fact there. And when you talk about the dinner with the seating, in a lot of those events, they prepare up there to be present for those events. They know about those events before they're even planned out that they're going to happen. And they act accordingly, and they will be sitting in a seat next to you if it is empty. They don't usually sit on top of people, but if there is an empty seat, it's not really empty. I can guarantee you that there is a soul there watching along with you. In addition to that, they do a bleachering effect in the corners of, like, let's say a wedding, for instance. They do a bleachering effect up in the corners up towards the ceiling, where hundreds of them flock in to watch, and they remain I call it they're on the high instead of the low, but meaning the same thing. They don't want to be a distraction. They don't want everybody at the wedding to be so hyper focused on the angels up in the corner and the loved ones up in the corner that they're not paying attention to the bride coming down the aisle. So, they are considerate of that too. They will ride in your car with you. And definitely those dinners, I promise you, they're showing up and they're bringing guests with them. So you've got more than just one person in that room for that sort of thing. Yeah, they're present for everything. They see everything.
And I think for us, and why we might ask that is because we've both lost people that were close to us, but we seem to talk more to these kind of earthbound spirits, and they're not necessarily negative things or spooky. Like you mentioned, there's something walking around our studio
not negative, though.
Often, and we have this sort of interaction, but we kind of miss sometimes. It's harder to get that interaction with, like, the deceased loved one. it's like they've crossed over, and for some reason that creates a barrier. It's not that they never communicate, it just it's harder to achieve. So is that a topic?
Yes.
Of
It,
your colors and
you know what? That will be a good topic for me to add in. I can add in another chapter because you're right about that. The thing is that you can ask them, like you're sitting here, you can say, hey, Mom, tonight during my dreams, come pop in and say hello, or leave me something so that I know that you were here. A lot of times it's just that we're hyper focused on the other things that we're not noticing the subtle messages that are being left. And that's why you can ask a loved one to be more overt, and like leaving a hair or moving a feather or the owl thing, all of that, ladybugs, pick one, that they can let you know that they are there. Because life is stressful and we're all very, very busy, and our mind, our kids, our spouses, our parents, are a million places at one time, and they understand that, and they're very subtle with the way that they approach. So you can verbally ask them to do that, and they can meet up with you or approach and leave something for you to confirm that they've been there, whether you have felt them there or not.
and those messages may be right there and you just have overlooked them. It's a bit like guardian angels, which they may or may not be, that maybe are trying to tell you, hey, dude, stop doing this, but you're just not listening or seeing the messages that they've been telling you for years. Joshua Dixon also threw out there, enjoy our last full moon.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. You got a full moon tonight. So this is a very special episode.
Venus is
Venus
is also going in retrograde. So yeah, it should be interesting.
Hopefully that's better than Mercury, because that bastard's going to affect me later.
Yeah, well, the thing about Venus, just real quick, is it has to do with relationships and money. So between starting today and the end of January, it's not really a good idea to spend too much money, because you might need it for something else. So, just keep your money close, keep receipts if you buy something new, just in case. It could be a good time to invest in crypto, because crypto will probably bottom out during this next month and then bounce back up after February. But and so only invest pennies if, in some of these smaller ones, just in case. But right now, expect any investment that you made beforehand to go down, because and money is hard to come by. Money you can get through work, but as far as, if you have money coming from the government or money coming from somebody owing you money, it's going to be delayed. So that's what that means. And just in relationships, it makes you look at them again. And sometimes those that aren't strong, they end. And what they end during Venus retrograde, it's usually permanent. So anyway, that's my astrology for today.
Oh, that's good.
Thank you.
Taylor says a red cardinal flies right across her, and she sees that as her father. Now, let me ask you, Lynn, do you do readings for people as well on your website? Now, let me bring up your website here. Do you do that kind of thing? You obviously have psychic abilities, and
well, it's my psychic abilities. They don't come through in the way. I am an empath. I can see things. I do communicate with the other side, but I don't do readings for people. I don't have that kind of a gift, or at least I haven't honed in and mastered it yet. Now I do consultations, for ghosts in people's houses, and I try to help them clear them out, over the phone if I can, or to send them some advice that way, because a lot of these people are on the other side of the United States. So, I try to consult in that way if I can. These gifts, they just kind of come on their own sometimes. Sometimes I can do it on purpose. Sometimes they just come when they want to. So like my mom popping in, sometimes she's like a megaphone in my ear, Pa, don't forget the aluminum foil. So, and you don't expect her to be there. You're like, oh, okay. Hello. If we have a couple of more minutes, I've got a really beautiful thing to close with.
yes, we do.
On the day that my mother passed away, I was the only one there. My brother was delayed getting there. And so as I'm sitting there, I'm watching from the other side of my mom's bed. I can see the movement on the other side of the veil. You know, every once in a while an elbow would peek out or a pant leg. And yes, they do show up in clothes, and they show up the way that you remember them last. So as the veil started to efface, there was an opening towards the head of my mother's bed. And I could see at that time my grandmother, my mother's mother, walk in. And she was in her little leisure suit that she used to make herself, and her tight curly perm and her glasses. You know, she looked exactly the way that I had seen her last, so I knew who she was. She came over to my mother's bed. Now, my mother at that point in time had not opened her eyes. She was not able to speak anymore, but she was present. She was moving her eyebrows up and down and doing this mouthing thing that was appropriate. If people came in and said something to her, she would respond that way. So when my grandmother came in, she started stroking the inside of my mother's forearm, and she leaned forward to my mother's ear and said something. And my mom starts doing that whoa, whoa, and moving her eyebrows up and down as my grandmother pulled away. She did this 3 times, and it was appropriate. You know, my mother's response was in line with my grandmother's response. And then I see waving frantically behind my grandmother's head, my beautiful sister that had been murdered. And I could smell her perfume. It filled the room. She wore an unusual perfume called Latisse back in the 80s. And I could smell her. I could see her. I felt her come around to me, and her hair went over my face. She had long, beautiful hair, and I could feel her embrace me. It was beautiful. She came from behind the crowd. And then at that point, the whole veil had effaced. So I could see directly in there of everything that was going on. And I said to my mother, I said, Mom, Grandma and Robin are here. It's time for you to go. And she started to mouth and do the thing at me, at what I had said. And she took her last breath within 10 minutes. As I'm sitting there, I'm watching up towards the head of her bed, and it looks like the spirits are doing a football huddle. And I'm thinking to myself, what on earth are they doing, that for? But as they started to open up, my mother was standing in the center of them. It was like they were trying to stabilize her spiritual feet. And the elation and the feeling of indescribable joy, and like, oh my God, what you would get from it is like something that you've never had, but once you get it, you recognize it and you realize how much you've missed it. You know what I mean? Coming from that other side. And I'm watching my mother, and each of these people are coming up and greeting my mother. And some of them I recognized, and some of them I did not, but she did. And I'm watching her beaming, and I can see into this background. And of course, I then look over at my mother and realize that she has stopped breathing. I'm sitting there grinning from ear to ear, because you can't help the love and elation that's coming over that you're experiencing, but not to feel joyous. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, I better call the nurse, because if she comes in and I'm smiling and my mother's dead, they're going to think that I did something to her.
There's something.
Right. It's just not a normal response.
Right.
So as they greeted her, the nurse came in, pronounced my mother that she had passed. They lingered in the room for about 20 minutes. And I asked if I could stay there. And I'm watching all of these festivities and them greeting her and her, hugging them. And the light from the other side that emitted didn't have a light source. It actually seemed to emit from within the atmosphere itself, if that makes sense. There was a tree in the background, and there was a clothed table type thing in the background with nothing on it. And of course, the explanation that my mom gave me about the potato salad and thinking about it explained why there was no refreshments. So, but there was this table type thing. Everybody was coming up. The light was as if standing under a tree on a sunny day and looking into the light, so that it wasn't like glaring and bright where you would have to squint. And to see them one by one, approaching her. And where I was sitting, there was a window behind me. And people say, oh, well, crack a window if somebody passes away. I don't understand the superstition behind that. And maybe it's just coincidence. But one by one, all of those souls left on my left side and passed me. And each one kind of stopped and leaned over the top of my head and kind of did something that felt energetic. And as my mother's walking up and she's getting closer, which of course I can see better at a distance, the spirits, I recognized her because my mother had beautiful legs and she was still in her patient gown, and I could see her legs. So I knew it was her as she was passing towards the window, and she hesitated. But, you know, getting to see that, I never really grieved the loss of my mother, because to me, I knew where she was. I knew that she was okay. She wasn't suffering anymore. And she's still very much around me. She's not dead. You know, I mean, people see leaving the physical body as such a finality. There's such a finality to it, but there's really not. You know, it's just, death is an extension of life. Some things that I've learned too is that their 20 years of our time is equivalent to one day on the other side. And so when we come here to do the schooling and things that we need to do here, it's really like we've only left for like 4 or 5 days to them by the time we return. So it's like we've taken a little vacation. There's just so many things that people don't realize about the other side that are in this book that I talk about. They are actually souls that have crossed over. A lot of times are playing with your children that are waiting to come in. You know, I had for instance of a lady that was passing. She was a patient of mine, and her daughter came in, and her daughter was like, 45 years old or something. She and her husband had been trying for years to have children. And this lady insisted. She said, there are 2 beautiful little girls, and they say that you are their mother. And when are you going to have those babies so that I can see them before I pass away? And of course, the daughter came back and told her, she said, we've been trying for years to have children, and we can't have children. And she was going through menopause at the time and thought that it would be impossible. And so again, the lady went through the rallying stage where they go in and out, and she had that moment where she was lucid and bright, and she came back again and she says, nope, those little girls are yours, and they look just like you, and they look alike. She said they look alike. They look almost the same. So the lady passes away, and the woman's father is now in the unit where I'm working, and I'm helping take care of him. About 6 months later, and she walks in, and she's got a baby bump. And so we had a little talk about that, because I was in the room when her mother kept insisting that she was going to have children. And she said, you know what? She said, I was pregnant, 3 weeks pregnant, when my mother passed away. She said, and I am having twins, and they are identical, and they are little girls. Wow. Well, over the period of time, her father was on the unit for about 1.5 years. So after she had the babies, she brought them in even as toddlers, and they looked just like her. So her mother was actually seeing them. And I mean, I've heard multiple things like that, of people talking about, oh, there's this little boy standing here, and he says that you're his dad. You know what I'm saying? And these different things, and he's waiting to come. So, there's so many things that I've learned from watching people pass away and being able to communicate with the other side that way, that I really, really hope will bring a lot of comfort to people. I really do. There's just so many reasons. Another thing, this was interesting too. My mother was telling me, she says, a lot of times people that have the ability to paint, for instance, that a lot of times you can ask an artist and they can kind of envision what the painting's going to look like finished in their mind before they start it. That's because they have painted it before. Oftentimes that's artwork that you have on the other side, and you repeat it and make it here, or you're drawn to a picture here or painting here. It's similar to something that you have on the other side, and that's why you're drawn to it, or that's why you're painting it. So,
I love that. Yeah, people like musicians like Paul McCartney, for instance, and will say, you know, his inspiration comes from, he doesn't know. He's like, the song is just here. Tori Amos, I love Tori Amos, says that her fairies write her songs.
Fairies.
And, you know, I felt like that writing music with myself, where it just seems to happen. It's like, where did that come from? You know, what is the nature of inspiration? It seems like there's definitely some kind of spiritual connection there, and it pops in your head. And to your other point about 20 years being like a day, totally believe that too. It seems like in any kind of astral experience, you know, we talk about them, there is no time. And it seems, I get this impression, we do, from spirits that we've communicated with on the other side. They have no sense of time. Nope. There's no time or really like space that doesn't take any time to go somewhere else or something like that. I don't have to get on a plane and go to Paris. You know, you want to be in Paris, you're in Paris, that kind of thing. And I have to imagine if we leave the mortal coil and join them, it's probably, now we're like, you know, apples to apples. And that whole lifetime that, you know, whatever, however many years you lived here, could be a blink of an eye, it could be a memory, but it's not going to feel like, oh my God, I've waited so long for this to happen. It probably feels instantaneous, like you were all along.
Well, because your soul doesn't change, you're just shedding your body. Oh, and if anybody's curious, yes, they do have sex. It's called merging. And the explanation for that is that the merging occurs, and it's like a continuous orgasm that can go on for hours. So I don't think our hearts could take it. If we were able to do that here, we would probably have a heart attack. But yes, they do have intimacy there for anybody that's wondering.
Holy crap. Well, you know, I was saying, you know, I was worried about people wanting to I know now they're rushing. No, something to look forward to, anyways. Right when the time is
right. And it is different than here. You know, I had a patient one time ask me. She said, you know, she says, my husband passed away when he was like in his 30s, and now I'm in my 90s. She said, when I cross over, is my appearance going to be repulsive to him? And I explained to her what I had been, you know, been channeled through, is that the median age on the other side is actually like 35. That's the age in this lifetime that we start to decline, but that's like the perfect age on the other side. And I explained to her that he will see you the same way that he saw you last. And also he understands that you've been aging in this lifetime, but when you cross over and you see him, you will appear to him the way that he remembers you the most, and the same as he will appear to you. So don't worry about, you know, him rejecting you because you're 60 years older now or something. That's not going to happen.
I've actually had that question, that thought in my head, and I wondered that.
What looks like on the other side? What's it like? But this has been wonderful.
Yes, thank you, as always.
The website is linmonet.com, LYNNMONET.com. The books are Omnipresent, What Happened After, and Colors of Heaven. We're getting that Colors of Heaven. We're on this. And we want to thank you so much, Lynn. This has been a wonderful talk. Our audience has loved it. We want to thank everyone in chat.
Thank you, guys. Thank you again for the stars.
Stay on with us. I'm going to take you out of the live stream real quick, and we'll talk real quick.
Just wanted to say about our friend Seraphy Early.
Hang on, baby.
Thank you.
I'm going to take you out of the stream, and we're going to finish up. We'll be right with you. All right. So thank you so much. I wanted to thank everybody in chat. Joshua, your question about the entity. Barry Taff was the parapsychologist that worked on. I investigated that case, and yes, I've heard of the entity, and I've been trying to get Barry on the show. We may do a interview at some time because that is a fascinating story. I want to say thank you to everybody who's joined us tonight. Liz, Joshua, Natalie is there.
Natalie, hi. I didn't see you. Thank you.
Anne-Marie Young, of course, Gail Heisen, everybody, all of you. I'm sure I'm missing a lot of you.
Yes.
But without you guys, we wouldn't have a show. So thank you so much for joining and especially sharing. Do check out, obviously, Lynn's website. Check out her books. We have read Omnipresent. It's a really great book.
It is.
you know, we love Lynn. She's awesome.
Yes.
Also, check out what's going on with Waverly Hills at savewaverlyhills.com. Next Thursday, we'll be back with Dark Horse Paranormal Podcast. Gail Heisen, who is in our audience tonight, will be joining us, and we love Gail. She's a good friend of ours. I can't wait to talk to her again. And Saturday is Christmas, so we're not sure what we're doing. We're not probably going to do a live show, but we'll do like a rebroadcast. I know a lot of you guys are busy, but then again, you know, you never know. You never know. We could come on, pop on and say hi or something. So there'll be some kind of show. We're just not sure what we're doing yet. Yeah. But we just want to say thank you. And we'll see you next Thursday on Dark Horse Paranormal.
Seraphine Hurley.
That's right. Oh, yeah.
You're
I'm
welcome.
sorry. Yes, right. I know. So many things to think about. Our very good friend, Seraphine Hurley, is going to be joining the Dark Horse Paranormal Productions family. She's going to be on our pages, which is Dark Horse Paranormal, Bigfoot and the Bunny, and the Paralinks Paranormal United Network.
Yep.
Again, we love that paranormal family, and she's going to be here live. I believe she's starting Thursday. She's going to be on Thursday, Saturdays as well. And sorry,
I was going to say
Infinite Inquisition is the name of her show.
Thank you.
And we're looking forward to talking to her, and I'm sure we'll have her on ours, and we'll be on her show as we go way back. And she's awesome. She's a great guest, extremely knowledgeable. You guys are going to love her. And that's all we have. So stay safe out there. Enjoy your holidays.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Happy holidays,
whatever you celebrate.
Hanukkah, everything.
Yes. Enjoy, and we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.